they're kind of evil in the fact that they're kind of racist. So if you think about it, he's Hitler, going a little bit crazy, aka he saw his own dead body in an alleyway earlier. Do not help the incel, because personally, if that was my brother, I wouldn't want to date him in the first place. Now we're comparing homosexuality to incest. Right. Hello everyone, and welcome to a recap on the Shadowhunters TV show. Specifically, if you hear the word Shadowhunters, it might be referring to either the long-standing book series written by Cassandra Clare or the TV show that was made. There's also a movie starring absolute diva Jamie Campbell Bower, which I've also watched. Amazing piece of television. The show, on the other hand, is loosely based on the specific Shadowhunter series of the Mortal Instruments, and I say loosely because they do just kind of do whatever they want eventually, because they had the ability to, and they just had to hit certain story beats, I suppose, and they changed the way they got there, and that's okay. It just made for some very interesting television, to say the least. And obviously, since the books and the series differs, if you want to know what happens in the books, Eric and Reed made a wonderful recap series about them all. I love those videos, so shout out to her. And to preface, I have read all of the books as well, so if I'm talking very confidently about something that sounds insane, that's because it was probably explained in the books and then I just wrote it down in my script, not thinking anything of it. I'll try and explain as thoroughly as I can, simply because this universe has a lot of lore, which is better explained in book because they have the space to do it. In the show, they kind of just like throw you in and they're like giving lore dumps the entire time. But I don't want to write those because they're boring and I simply knew them in my head. So I'll try and give the lore dumps as I go. And starting off with season 1, here are all of our characters that we have to end up talking about eventually. And this is the biggest board of photos that I've had in any of my rehab videos. We're going to be here for a while. In season 1, episode 1, The Mortal Cup, I need you to stick with me for the entirety of this episode because it is so much lore building and it's a loaded pilot. So much happens in this. We open with 3 mysterious figures. These 3 people, if you will. We don't know their names yet, so you don't know their names yet. And they are following someone on like a shadowy street, okay? And this girl is not serving the hair that she has now. She's serving fuck ass bob because it's in a wig way. And the guy that they're following is like shape-shifting to like blend in with the crowd and like just make himself other people that they pass to get them off his tail, if you will. And then they follow him into a club. And the blonde boy here, who you might recognize as being the man in the Taylor Swift style music video or from saying the F slur on Facebook Live, he ends up bumping into our main character of the show, Clary. And then she yells at him for running straight into her, if you will. He seems surprised that she can see him. Put a pin in that for later. And now we flash back into earlier in the day. Clary's doing a presentation for a art institute that she wants to get into because she's an artist. And then when she's showing off these drawings, she also finds random drawings of a symbol that she's drawing against her will. I wonder if this will be important. And after her presentation, she's going out to celebrate her 18th birthday with her friend Simon. Just to put this out here, I hate Simon with most of my life force in this specific era. We'll get to him later in the season that I don't really mind him, but right now, I kind of hate him. And then she's getting ready to go out for her birthday at her house. And then she sees her mom, whose name is Jocelyn. And her mom gives her a present of what's called a stele. And this is basically a stick with a crystal on top of it. And her mom doesn't really explain what this is because Clary's like, I gotta go out for my birthday. I gotta go. And she doesn't really care. And Clary's mom is presenting it in a way of like, this is something really big that I have to tell you. But Clary just does not care at all. And then is going to a show for Simon's band because of course he's in a band. And then afterwards they're going out to a club. And then we also get a flashback with the mysterious people who were following that random man, and they were getting an assignment to follow a demon. So the guy that was shapeshifting was indeed a demon. And the blonde boy's name is Jace. The hottie over here's name is Alec, and who is in the bob is Isabel, who is Alec's sister. And then that assignment of course leads them to the club where Jace bumps into Clary, and now we're back in present time. And he's trying to get out of the conversation with Clary as quick as he can because he has things to do. But he leaves with probably the most ominous thing ever, which just looks at her and says, you have the sight. And she's like, that was really weird. And because Clary's so freaked out about this, she starts following them through the club. And she follows them to like a back room that's secluded in the club, and they're about to stab someone, which is the demon they were following. And the reason that they're hunting the demon is because it was draining people of blood, and they call like normal humans outside of this realm of theirs mundanes, and that's just because they're mundane. And she tries to save the person that they're about to stab because she thinks it's an innocent person. And then she realizes they're like fighting a bunch of people because I guess the demons came with reinforcements, if you will. And then she accidentally stabs one of the demons. And when the demons die, they just dissolve because they're actually sent back into hell. I do believe. Lore's never explained, to be honest, unless I just didn't write it down because I didn't care. But Clary is of course freaked out because she just stabbed someone and thinks that she killed them. So she leaves because she's like, I need to get out of here. And then she goes home and surprisingly enough actually tells her mom about this whole situation because she's like, I'm freaking out. Like, I think I just killed someone. But her mom actually says that it's related to herself, and actually shows with the stele that she gifted her that she has markings similar to Jace, Isabel, and Alec, which they look like tattoos, if you will, that she has those on her body. And so Claire's like, so you're one of those people too? Like, what's going on? And then as Claire's like freaking out from this news because she's like, I thought I knew who my mom was, but like she's turned out to be this different person. Jocelyn's friend, whose name is Dorothea, I think, I don't know, they call her Dot. She runs in there and warns Jocelyn that someone is coming. And then at the same time, Dot also transports Clary into the police station because Clary's token father figure, if you will, whose name is Luke, he actually works at the police station. So she transports Clary there in order to talk to Luke. The reason that Luke is her father figure is because her dad is actually dead. That's what her mom tells her anyway. And everyone thinks that Luke and Jocelyn are like in love, but Luke is definitely in love with Jocelyn. Anyway, when Clary gets transported into the police station, she actually overhears a conversation. Someone is interrogating Luke and asking him about something called the Mortal Cup. And Luke claims that he doesn't even care about Clary's family. He's like, I don't know where the cup is and I don't care about them. And so Clary is very sad because of this, because she's like, I thought that he was like my father, you know? And so she runs back to her apartment, and then she finds the apartment in complete shambles. Things are like thrown everywhere and her mom is gone. And this is because people working for a guy named Valentine actually kidnapped her mom and like ransacked the apartment because they were looking for the Mortal Cup. And this up here is Valentine. I don't think we actually see a face reveal until like later, but when I'm talking about Valentine, I'm going to be pointing to him, so it doesn't really matter. And we know this information because we see Jocelyn get kidnapped, but Clary doesn't know this information at all because she's not well versed in anything going on in the situation. She barely figured out that her mom was like having secrets from her today. Clary is obviously crashing out because she's in her broken apartment, and then she actually gets attacked by a demon who's asking her about the Mortal Cup. And Jace actually shows up to save her from being killed by this demon, but she still ends up getting bit, and so she passes out from demon poison. And she wakes up in a random infirmary that she's never been in with Isabel, of all people, and she has no idea what happened because she just like passed out after being bit by what she thought was like a hallucination, because everything that she knew about her life is kind of a lie right now. When she wakes up, Alex says something about reporting her to the Clave, which is the government for their organization. And this is because he's obviously mad about her being here in the respect that she was like a mundane before this. And also he's showing some jealousy with her connection to Jace, which is like practically non-existent at this point, but just put a pin in that for later. And Jace introduces himself to Clary as Jace Wayland. You don't have to remember that last name because it won't stick. Anyway, he finally puts a name to all what's going on right now, aka he explains that they are shadow hunters, as well as her mom was a shadow hunter. And what they do is they protect mundanes from demon attacks and also have some deal with the downworld. And that includes different supernatural species like warlocks, vampires, all that jazz. And shadow hunters specifically have runes on their bodies, which are like the tattoo things made by Celes. And one of them makes them invisible to mundanes. And that's because if everyone could see them, it would only cause problems in the respect they were killing people on the street. This is why Jace was surprised that Clary could see him, because usually people can't, and only people who have the sight can see them. And that's because they have Shadowhunter blood in them or any semblance of like different blood. And to get to this out of the way here, because I will forget to say it later, warlocks are half demon, half human. Okay, so it's demon blood infused. Vampires are simply turned by like a demonic disease, if you will, of like getting bit by another vampire. How the first vampire came to be, that's not my problem. They don't probably explain that. I don't know. Werewolves are another thing included, and they are simply bitten by another werewolf, aka given a demonic disease as well. And then fairies, so fae folk, Court of Thousand Roses, I see you, they are actually half angel, half demon. So the Shadowhunters kind of see themselves as like the highest order because they are half human, half angel, and so they think they're like the purest people in this realm. And anyone with demon blood or a demon curse is seen as the downworlders because they're an oppressive government. The Clave, which is the government controlling the Shadowhunters, and by consequence, all of the downworld, which makes no sense, they have something called the Accords, and that is basically an agreement that includes all of the downworld and loosely the fairies, which their group is called the Sealies, and that's what they're referred to more as. But they have like kind of their own government, and so they are not as closely controlled by Shadowhunters, and also because Shadowhunters don't trust them for some odd reason, they're actually more related to them than anyone else. But basically they look down on the rest of the people who have different blood in them because it's human blood. So evil government. And this will be important as we go through the season, but just have that in your mind that the Shadowhunters kind of control everything. They're kind of evil in the fact that they're kind of racist. Anyway, after Jace gives this whole speech about what Shadowhunters are, not necessarily to the extent that I gave of the whole government business, she doesn't really know that. Sarah gets a call from Simon, and he says that he's outside the abandoned church that she's in, and that's because the place that she's in, like the infirmary, is glamored to be like an abandoned church. He has like her location on his phone, and so he's like wondering like, why are you here? And she goes out to meet Simon because she's trying to explain the situation without trying to freak him out, if you will, and Jace comes out with her because he's attacking a demon that he senses nearby or something. And he actually ends up making himself visible to Simon because Claire's like, please, I don't want to see them. I get schizophrenic. And it also turns out that the person that was attacking her was from the Circle, which is Valentine's old group of like vigilantes, if you will, that were trying to take over the Clave's control of Shadowhunters and the Shadow World, if you will. And this is newly brought up because everyone thought that Valentine was dead, and suddenly Circle members are coming back and asking for the Mortal Cup. And then we actually end up seeing Valentine with Jocelyn's unconscious body, and he's trying to figure out like a way to wake her up. And then someone, like one of his henchmen, tells him that she has a daughter, which he was not aware of. And Jocelyn is unconscious without a way to wake her up, is because she took a potion right before she got kidnapped that basically put her unconscious and they couldn't wake her up. As I said, loaded pilot, especially when you have no idea what's going on. We will get introduced to more groups, as I explained with like the downworlders and stuff in the following episodes. In episode 2, The Descent into Hell isn't easy. Clary ends up explaining to Simon a good gist of what's going on, including the supernatural world that's existing around him that he had no idea about before. And they end up bringing him into what's called the Institute, and that is where they were with like the lab and stuff. And he's very skeptical about this whole situation because he just thinks that Claire's like kind of on drugs and making these things up. But then he gets distracted by Isabel because she is drop dead gorgeous. The genes in this family are absolutely insane because Alec, Hottie McHottie over there. I get gagged by his face card every time he's on screen, but he's also, at the beginning of the season, the most annoying bitch ever. He is simply a rule follower and he won't do anything else, and it really pisses me off. But he'll get better, trust. And Isabel, honestly a diva all throughout. Like literally, I never have a problem with her ever. Isabel and Simon end up flirting a little bit, aka Isabel does, because Simon is completely in love with Clary in like a really weird way, in like a way that I don't like because I don't like him. And I honestly only don't like him when he is pining after Clary because he has no chance. He genuinely has no chance, and he should know that. They've been best friends since childhood, and she's shown no romantic interest in him this entire time, so I feel like he should just give it up, or at least confess his feelings, because he's pissing me off. Clary just ends up leaving Simon with Isabel to talk, because her and Jace end up talking to the Institute's weapons coordinator, whose name is Hodge, and this is because he's an ex-Circle member. He used to be in the Circle when it was like first risen, when, I don't know, Valentine was in like his 20s, something like that. And he is now stuck at the Institute because the rune that was put on him with the Circle, it's literally just a huge circle on his neck. There's magic in it to punish him if he tries to leave or if he tries to talk about the Circle, which is counterintuitive because they're asking questions about the Circle. And he reveals that none other than Clary's mom was in the Circle as well. And not only that, but her and Valentine were kind of an item, but we'll get more into that later. And then also around this time, Luke, who was in the police station, as we know, when Jocelyn got kidnapped, he figures out that Clary was actually at the police station the same time as he was being interrogated. And so he tries to figure out where she went after that. And so he talks to the person who transported her to the police station, Dot, and Dot is a warlock. She, of course, has magic, hence why she could transport Clary into the police station. And Dot says, I have no idea where she is, but I am trying to find her as well. And at the same time, Clary also decides that she wants to look for Dot because she might know where the Mortal Cup is. And everyone is asking about the Mortal Cup, including the Shadowhunters. They want it as well. And that's because everyone wants to keep it away from Valentine, and demons want it to give power over Shadowhunters and the rest of the realm. And also some demons are working for Valentine, so that they might just be asking for it for him. And Clary wants it selfishly because her mom was kidnapped for the Mortal Cup, and so if she gets the Mortal Cup, she can get her mom back. Also because she knows that Valentine will use it for evil if he gets it. And I don't know if they know the full extension of his plan at this point, but just know that the Mortal Cup was actually the thing that made Shadowhunters to begin with, because they put angel blood inside of the cup, a normal human drink from it, and they become a Shadowhunter. And then I assume through a lot of incest later, they have a whole family of Shadowhunters. But moral of the story is that the Mortal Cup is extremely powerful and can create new Shadowhunters, hence why Valentine wants it. He wants to create more Shadowhunters, but in a very unethical way, because it's really not supposed to be used more than the first time it was used. It's just kind of like a relic thing in the Shadowhunter world. And they're all going to go out and find Dot, even though Alec is complaining about this because it's against his government rules, because he's boring and is following the oppressive government, which he was born in. And the only way that they have of finding Dot is Clary is following visions that she gets about Dot's whereabouts. I don't remember how she gets these visions. I think it's from like a necklace of some sort that has a crystal on it. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, she sees Dot get attacked by a group of Circle members, and she recognizes the location where it is, and so they go there, and by the time they get there, Dot is gone. And at this point, Clary's kind of given up on the Dot trail, and so she's like, wouldn't I know where the Mortal Cup is if it was in my own home? And Jace pieces it together that Clary's memories must have been wiped, because obviously she knew nothing about the Shadow world, even though she definitely would have been followed by demons because she has Shadowhunter blood in her. And so she realizes that her mom was wiping her memories periodically, which is kind of crazy. And because she can like kind of recall like certain memories about demons finding her and stuff now, like they're coming back to her, Jace realizes that the memory of where the Mortal Cup is specifically blocked. And so they all go to see the Silent Brothers, which are a group of ex-Shadowhunters with special powers. And these are these guys, aka they look freak by definition. They talk telepathically because their mouths are sewn shut. And the reason that they go to the Silent Brothers is because they have a sword that basically forces you to tell the truth. And they're thinking this will therefore get her memory out, because if she has to say the truth, it's somewhere in her brain. It's just blocked. And they don't allow the whole gang to go in, and it's like at a graveyard. Like the entrance to the Silent Brothers is at a graveyard or something. So only Jace and Clary go in. And they end up having a heart-to-heart about how Jace's parents are actually dead and that his father was actually in the circle and that's why he died. But Jace seems to have fonder memories of his father, even though we'll get to it with the stories that he tells. His father was abusive, okay? Let's just put that out there. I think Jace more of like misses his father, and so he's like, oh, I'm really gonna stick to the happy memories I had with him. He like trained him to fight and stuff like that. That was kind of the recollection they have of his father. I don't remember how his mother died. It's not really important, as we'll see later. And Clary, obviously going through a lot with like losing her mother very suddenly, even if she is just kidnapped at this point, tries to, give him condolences. But he says, no, Shadowhunters don't have feelings. It actually doesn't matter. And this is because they're like the Jedi. They are allowed to have relationships at least, but they're really not allowed to get in the way of like their work and things like that. And so feelings cloud judgment. That's kind of like the forte of the Shadowhunters. And then when Clary gets the sword put over her head, which is like forces her to tell the truth or whatever, she actually recovers the memory of Jocelyn saying that Valentine is her father. So when I said that Jocelyn and Valentine are a bit of an item, yeah, they did have a child. And that's why it was so interesting for him to hear that Jocelyn had a daughter, because he realizes that it's probably his, judging the fact that they were together around the time that Clary would have been conceived. And because of this, Clary has a mental breakdown, respectively so, because the evil man that she's now hearing about that she had no idea of before turns out to be her father, even though Jocelyn told her that her father was like a general that died at sea or something. I don't remember. It was something silly. And then while all this was happening, everyone else was waiting outside in the graveyard, and Simon and Isabel were in Simon's van together because that's how they were getting around, I suppose. They were just driving Simon's van that has like all this band stuff in it. Isabel hears a noise outside, so she goes out to investigate and leaves Simon alone. And then Simon ends up getting kidnapped. And they eventually find him, but he's being held hostage by a vampire. And because of the Accords, as I talked about earlier, they can't actually intervene with vampire business, and the vampires are asking for the mortal cup in return for Simon. And of course they don't have it, and so Clary's kind of like trying to strike up a deal, and it's not really working. And while all this was happening, the Circle actually kidnapped Dot when she was getting attacked, and then she ended up getting taken, and they're trying to torture the information about who made the potion that Jocelyn took to make her unconscious, because they want to break it in order to wake her up. And she is not budging at all, and she ends up escaping only to get killed. So bye-bye, you were here for a solid 2 episodes. In episode 3, Dead Man's Party. Clary is pushing for the entire group to go save Simon because he is a helpless human who can't really defend himself. And Alec is saying no because it's against the clave. Capital B, boring, bro. They eventually convince him because in some grounds of the Accord, kidnapping a human is against the rules for the vampires, but that's only if they actually like eat off him, I'm pretty sure, so they're going to rescue him. And Simon is being held by a vampire named Raphael, and his boss is named Camille. She calls the shots for everyone, and she's the one like behind kidnapping Simon, I suppose, for some reason. And Raphael is trying to argue that going against the Accords now and kidnapping Simon is stupid because Valentine is back. And so they kind of want protection from Clave now more than ever because Valentine notoriously hates downworlders. He is racist to his core. Raphael's like, I don't know if we should be breaking the Accords right now because we kind of want protection. And Camille says it's better to have the Mortal Cup so that they will do whatever they have to do for it. And also the Mortal Cup can control demons, so it's not only a great tool for Shadowhunters to create new Shadowhunters, but also if they can control demons, they wouldn't have to fight demons all the time. So Valentine not only wants to make an army of different Shadowhunters, but also an army of demons that he can use to spread his dictatorship, if you will, because he wants to take over and make Shadowhunters the, like, I guess, superior race. So if you think about it, he's Hitler. And the vampires have a certain lair, which is an abandoned hotel. That's where they like base out of, and it's difficult to get into. And so Isabel goes to the Sealy land to talk to kind of her like hookup buddy, whose name is Meliorn, and she's trying to ask him questions about how to get into the hotel. And Sealy's can't lie. That's a certain thing about them. They like physically cannot lie, but they can bend the truth. They're very good at that because they have to adapt. Because of this, he's kind of like dodging questions about what she's asking. Anyway, they're doing this all while having sex. Impressive. And while Isabel is trying to get information, Jace, Alec, and Clary are trying to get weapons for the attack. And so they're going to the graveyard again because in certain people's graves, there are Shadowhunter weapons. Sure, why not? Alec's main weapon is a bow and arrow, and he can't find one in this grave that they're looking at, and so he decides to go back to the Institute to get his, specifically. And before he leaves, he has a conversation with Jace along the lines of saying that Jace is only doing what he's doing for Clary because of like a little like crush that he has on her, and not for the cup. And he says that he should be careful about that. If anything, he is serving jealousy. And he also, in this conversation, he drops the lore that him and Jace are parabatai, which is like a soul bonding thing in Shadowhunters. And this means that like their life force is connected. Not necessarily, but if one dies, the other like gets part of their soul ripped out. So kind of, if you think about it. And after Alec leaves, Jace does not heed his advice, aka he's teaching Clary how to use the Shadowhunters knives. And the props in the show are really funny because they do just look like plastic swords. They do, but they light up when a Shadowhunter holds them specifically. They can only be used by Shadowhunters. Again, oppressive government. Right. And when he's like teaching her how to like strike or something, he is way too close to her. You just met. And they end up going to a biker bar because Jace is like, yeah, I need something there. When they walk in, he tells Clary to go flirt with some random guy. And she's like, okay, I guess. And he turned out to be a vampire. And Jace was doing this to test Clary's ability because vampires have a thing where they can like, what's it called in Vampire Diaries? I don't remember. They can like influence people by using their words because of like a certain power they have. And at the same time, this is happening to Simon because Camille is basically sexually assaulting him by... The only thing I could find was compulsion. That's not the word I'm looking for. I don't remember what it is. But moral of the story is that she's basically convincing him to make out with her against his will. Lovely. And it's kind of like getting Jedi mind tricked, if you will. Like, you still have control of your body, but your mind is kind of like in mental la la land. That's what Simon is dealing with right now. Like, he's technically feeling that he's making out with someone, but it's more like his head is like floating. And while this is going on, Camille's trying to get information about the Mortal Cup from him, but of course he knows nothing because he barely learned about the fact that this world exists like maybe a few hours ago. And then Clary actually ends up getting tricked because she obviously hasn't trained in this, and also Jace didn't tell her. The guy turns into a vampire. He was like glamoring himself to seem more human-like before, and he somehow turns uglier. Anything I learned from Twilight or the Vampire Diaries is that vampires are supposed to be hot. So like, what is this propaganda? And then the vampire's like going to attack Clary because he realizes that she's a shadow hunter. And then Jace fights him for the keys to his bike. And this is because the bikes fly and Jace wanted one. And then back with Isabel, she gets information from Meliorn with the entrance to the Hotel du Mort, that's because he's a little bit of a man whore, aka he's also having sex with Camille on the side. But they are well aware that they're not exclusive, so she's not mad about that. And then her and Alec meet up to be the distraction for Jace and Clary to get inside the hotel to rescue Simon. And Simon's still getting sexually assaulted, but now he's actually biting her neck and breaking the skin, which is very odd. But we'll get to it later. And then Camille starts tweaking because she smells Shadowhunter blood. And so she realizes that Jace and Clary are like nearby. And Jace and Clary actually go in through the roof, hence why flying bite. And then with the whole biting business going on, a little bit of lore, when a vampire bites someone, it's like they're like high or something, and they have a feeling of like loving that person. And so because of this, Simon is very loopy and like attached to Camille in some way because I think she also bit him. And I think in response to this, Jace gets really emo and he's like, I've never been in love, which like, why do I care? Honestly, everyone got pissing me off in the beginning of this season, except for Clary, because she has her priorities, she's sticking to them. Everyone else is kind of being a weirdo. Alec is being mean. Isabel's perfect. Simon is just weird in all respects. Like, he's a nerd to say the least, and I don't like how he's like obsessed with Clary in a weird way, you know? And then Jace is just like emo boy. Anyway, the group all meets up after a while of killing some vampires. Isabel is doing it all in a bodycon dress because even if she's fighting, she is dressed up to the nines, like genuinely. She is always fitted up, sometimes in bad dresses, but that's just personal taste, but she's always eating. And Camille just ends up leaving because she doesn't want to get captured because she did indeed break the Accords just herself because she was the one who was behind kidnapping Simon, and the rest of the vampires are low-key okay. And Raphael just lets Simon go because he doesn't want to get on the Shadowhunters' bad side, and he never did. And then after Simon is safe, him and Clary have like a conversation that's very tension-filled, aka he's so obviously in love with her, and she is none the wiser. And then Jace and Alec have another fight about Clary. Seems Alec is very concerned about Jace's connection to her. And then Alec runs off because of it. And after this, Simon is very suspiciously looking directly at Clary's pulse in her neck. I wonder what that's about. I took a lunch break and then I realized that I wasn't wearing mascara, which is actually a crime against the mascara budget that the show has because main actress, but apparently no falsies needed. She's just gifted with those eyelashes. They're genuinely insane. She's on screen. I'm like, I'm looking at her eyelashes because they're so long. And apparently shout out to the CoverGirl Lash Bloom mascara. That's what gave her the look. Yeah. My Girl vs. Monster Diva right there. The guy who plays Alec, I think it's Matthew Daddario, brother to Alexandra Daddario. My queen, my lovely. I love her. He was in the new Hallmark Buffalo Bills movie. And that's the reason I watched it because I was like, that's my man Alec right there. I love this man. He's so hot. So I watched it and he seems to be doing Hallmark acting just fine. So good for him. Anyway, short rant later. In episode 4, Raising Hell, Clary is sleeping at the Institute because where else would she have to go? Her apartment is completely torn apart. So she wakes up from a nightmare in the Institute and it's about her mom telling a man to protect her and she feels like her brain is being ripped out. So possibly related to her getting her memories taken away. And she wakes up in the room to who she thinks is Jace, but it's actually Simon. And then she explains her dream because she's like kind of distraught over it, if you will. And then they talk about peace and love and being safe or whatever. And then Jace overhears the conversation and then dips because I think he was like going to go comfort her. But then he saw that Simon was there. So he left. And then they come to the conclusion that it was probably about when Clary's memories got taken, and so they're like trying to get information out of her about what else was in the dream because that could connect to who was the one who blocked her memories. And then Clary mentions that her mom called the other guy in the dream Magnus. And then Simon actually gives some information because he says that when Camille was sexually assaulting him, even though he was in mental la la land, he could still like form memories. And so he remembered Camille complaining about a guy named Magnus Bane. So Clary leaves to go tell Jace about this information because it can lead to them unblocking her memories. And then Simon ends up getting a vision of Camille and his mouth starts bleeding. Because of this, Simon is very adamant about leaving the Institute, and he tries to convince Clary to just have them do it as a duo because he says, oh yeah, like we've never needed anyone else. At the same time, you are now dealing with a supernatural world that they've never been in before, so it makes sense to actually have other people. And he mostly just wants to get Clary away from Jace. And he ends up leaving by himself. And I don't care because he's pissing me off. And then at the Institute, they end up doing some research on Magnus Bane, who is a warlock that is like one of the most powerful ones. He's the High Warlock of Brooklyn because they each have like areas where they cover basically. And so he lives in Brooklyn. And everything here is set in New York. I never mentioned that, but that actually adds a lot element to this. Like all these Shadowhunters are running in New York killing demons. Like that is what's going on. And so the institute they're going based out of is the New York Institute. And there's institutes all over the world. And the Shadowhunters like headquarters is based out of a mythical land called Idris. They'll bring it up periodically. Like if they're going to go do business or something, they'll go to Idris. And it's really not important. This season at least. Anyway, Magnus Bane is about like 500 years old because both vampires and warlocks are immortal because I guess of their demon blood, but werewolves are not. They age normally. And sealers are not either, I don't think. And then they're talking to Hodge about their research and everything. And Hodge pulls out a necklace that Magnus bought for his past lover, which happens to be Camille. I mean, like, I can imagine all of the immortal beings of this world probably fucked at one point. They're planning to use this necklace as bait for a meetup with Magnus. This happens a lot throughout the season, but we cut to Valentine and he is indeed killing downworlders and also experimenting with downworlder blood. Fun. And Luke is in trouble with his boss. So I guess he's not the captain of the police force, but he's like higher up because he has like people underneath him. And he's in trouble because he's not really doing his job. And also he works at the police station to cover up downworlder things and like Shadowhunter things in general. So then the people don't get suspicious of like random bodies that show up and stuff like that. And his friend down here who also works for him, his name's Alaric, he is telling him to basically just make it seem like he's doing his job so he doesn't get fired. And they're planning on doing a meeting with Magnus at a club, I do believe. And so Isabel gives Clary new clothes because all of Clary's clothes are not like club worthy. And so she like gives her like a short black dress or something. And then Jace gives her another lesson on knives, even though they already went over that. And just because like he likes her. Also, not only has she gotten a lesson, she's used a knife perfectly fine and like killed someone with it. And obviously they set up this meeting with Magnus and his friend is trying to convince him not to go because he is avidly being hunted by Valentine because he's like one of the most powerful warlocks or whatever. And this is Magnus up here. He's an absolute diva. Literally fake character alert. I love Magnus with my whole heart. I love him. With this all technically illegal business and like self-detective work, Alec is having a crash out to Isabel because he's like, this is against the clave, blah, blah, blah. And he's such a Debbie Downer. And I hate him and I don't care. And then Simon finally gets home since he left the institute and he's being harassed by both his bandmate and his mom for being out all night because he didn't come home at all. And his bandmate is surprisingly a woman. I just don't think that he could have like woman friends without being weird, but you know, like, okay. And this turns out to be true because his bandmate named Maureen actually reveals that she wants to date him, which is such a choice because like I would never do that. He's so annoying and so weird. And also anyone with eyes can see that he's in love with Clary. I'm pretty sure Maureen also knows that, but like she's willing to shoot her shot. And don't get it twisted, he's not bad looking, but he's like annoying all the time. And of course he says no, and so she leaves, but she cuts herself when she leaves on something and he licks the blood off. But cut away from that, let's go to the club. And they're trying to make a deal with Magnus that they will trade Clary's memories because Magnus was the one who took them away, if you will. They want to trade Clary's memories for the necklace that they have. And he actually reveals that Dot is dead as well. So a lot is happening for Clary today. And he also reveals that he gave her memories to a demon for safekeeping. So he does not have them himself. And then Magnus sees Alec for the first time and he's like, oh, who are you? I've never seen a Shadowhunter look that good. See, we all can see a hottie. Objectively beautiful man. Like literally like dropped gorgeous man. And yet he's an annoying little piece of shit in the beginning of the season. Anyway, fun little flirty exchange from Magnus. And then Alec ends up crashing out in front of Clary about the whole situation. And Clary has a crash out because her memories are currently being guarded by a demon. She can't get to them. And she's going through a lot. And then Alec is just being like an asshole to her. And then turns out that Jace actually stole something from Magnus because if you have an item, there's a certain rune that can track something. And it's more powerful with a parabatai rune because with parabatai bonding, any rune that you draw will like become stronger. And so Jace is convincing Alec to use their parabatai tracking in order to find Magnus and try to get Clary's memories back more. Because Magnus just like gave up. He was like, yeah, they're with a demon. That's not my problem. Sorry. And a parabatai bond is very strong. As I said, it's like soul bonding. And when they're doing this rune, it's giving gay. Or is it one-sided? we shall see. And they track Magnus to a abandoned warehouse, and at this abandoned warehouse, circle members are attacking Magnus, and Magnus is low-key holding his own to a certain respect, because his magic, very strong, he's 500 years old, but he's fighting back, and then Alec helps him out. And warlocks each have like different signs that they are magical, like when they're using magic, obviously, and Magnus's is that he has cat eyes whenever he's using magic, which is fun. I don't know if they keep this. They definitely don't keep this. They only keep this for like this first scene, and I think it's just because of CGI. The CGI in this show is kind of bad, objectively. It gets better, I would say. But also, I just think that they didn't really care that much. And if you don't look that closely, then it's really not that bad. And then Magnus and Alec are talking after Alec saved his life or whatever. And Magnus is obviously flirting because he's like, that's a beautiful, beautiful man right there. And Alec is really nervous, but like objectively, they are flirting. And that's my ship right there. I don't want to hear anything about like love triangle bullshit with Clary, Jace, whatever. Like literally, I couldn't care anything about them. Magnus and Alec are my babies. I love them so much. And their story in the books is so much more linear than in the show. The show like likes to butcher them so bad in this season, and I'm not excited to talk about it. And because Clary ended up helping a warlock girl, I forgot what the context was, but she basically like saved her life. Magnus agrees to summon the demon that he gave her memories, as long as she makes the demand. And this is because Magnus kind of believes that all Shadowhunters are like evil and oppressive, like their government, which is most commonly what happens. But since he saw Clary like actually helping a downworlder, he's willing to do that. And Magnus is again flirting with Alec, like literally like this whole time he's like trying to impress him with his magic and stuff like that. Alec is very confused. He's like honestly not getting the signs, and also he's just nervous. And then Magnus also gives Isabel the necklace that they gave as a deal, because the stone itself like lights up when demons are nearby. And Isabel just really liked it. She thought it was really pretty. And so Magnus just gives it to her, which is so sweet. And then when he's talking to Isabel, Magnus also is asking questions about Alec, and then he calls him Pretty Boy. And they have Clary draw the summoning circle for the demon because she's an artist after all. And then Magnus says that she's better than Michelangelo, and then casually drops that he had sex with Michelangelo. And also because he's kind of trying to like put it out like towards Alec. He's like, I have sex with men. He's like trying to get a reaction out of Alec to like see what he thinks. And then Alec is again confused. He's not picking up on the signs at all. And they all have to hold hands around the summoning circle, and they can't break it unless the demon leaves. And then when they summon the demon, in order to give the memories back to Clary, it asks for a memory of each person of someone that they love the most. And the memories aren't that important. I'll just like name whose is whose. So Izzy's is Alec, which makes sense, brother and sister. Clary's is her mom. That's like her only family, so that makes sense. And then Alex is Jace. When he sees this, because everyone can see the memories as they're going, he tries to deny it right when it goes up, and then it breaks the bond because he's a dumbass, and also because he's like crashing out. And Jace gets taken by the demons, and his hair looks fuck ass, as it does this whole season, because like the side of it is shaved and then it's just like flipped to one side, and he's so much hair on the top of his head, and I hate it. Also, the guy who plays Jace is British, and you wouldn't believe that because he has a very good American accent. Whenever I see him, I do just think of the clip where he said the F slur on Facebook Live, and then the consequent apology video after. And it isn't funny in the fact that he said the F slur, but the apology video is so funny, especially like when stitched together with the video. It is generally one of the funniest videos I've ever seen in my life.
Maybe I should go to New Zealand.
Yo.
What's up?
What's up, Beck?
What? Stop.
Why?
Live?
I'm speaking to all of you today to hold myself accountable and not to make any excuses in any way. The way I behaved today was disgusting and horrible, and Matt's reaction was absolutely correct. It was one of disgust.
And then Clary ends up killing the demon in order to save Jace's life because he's about to get like stabbed, and that means that her memories are gone forever because that demon was the only thing holding them. But at least Jace is alive. Alec is still kind of crashing out about this experience because he's like, oh my god, everyone's gonna know that I love Jace. And to him, obviously, he's concerned about it changing things because he actually likes Jace in a way that's like romantic. Magnus is trying to give him like a pep talk about not being ashamed about who he is, but that's very against Shadowhunter code. Again, they're racist, homophobic, all of the gist. The main reason, outside of like obvious homophobia and all that, why Alec didn't want to like admit his feelings for Jace, tell anyone, is also because Parabatai aren't allowed to have romantic relations at all because it like messes with the bond, and so they just have to be like besties instead of like romantically interested. So that's mostly why he like never said anything. It's just really not getting through to Alec because that's how he grew up, and he's more of just like masking and denying his feelings for them rather than like thinking about them. And then at the end, Simon goes back to the Hotel du Moor because of course he does. He has a death wish after all. Episode 5, Mushu to go. Clary gets a random vision of Valentine and her unconscious mother. And this is because she has a necklace that has a portal shard in it. And portals are how you teleport to different places, if you will. I'm pretty sure the only people who can make portals are warlocks, but that's neither here nor there. Well, the story is that she has this necklace. I think she got it from Dot. And the reason that you can transport through a portal is thinking about the place that you want to go. So if you don't know what it looks like, you could end up like in the abyss, but that's neither here nor there. Because she's thinking about her mom, she's seeing visions of her mom. And Clary tells Jace this information about the whole vision business. And then he tells Alec, and Alec, of course, is freaking out and says that the necklace is too dangerous because it could go both ways, and so he locks it up. And Alec and Jace end up having a convo about the whole memory thing because he basically tells Alec to not freak out because he's like, obviously, we love each other, we're parabatai. So it's not clicking to Jace. He's like, oh, like that's normal. He just loves me like a bro. And Alec is like, yeah, for sure. And then after this, none other than Alec and Isabel's mother, whose name is Maurice, she shows up at the Institute because technically their parents are supposed to be running the Institute, but they go back and forth from Idris all the time. So Alec is basically running that place. And she's mean to her children. And this is only to her biological children. She's lovely to Jace. She loves Jace so much, but she is very judgmental of Isabel in specific because it's like her only daughter and also kind of a bitch to Alec. And she sends Izzy and Jace on a mission just by themselves. And Alec is very mad about this because he doesn't get to go on the mission and it's apparently an important one. And he's stuck babysitting Clary because Maurice doesn't trust Clary because she just like showed up one day. She's like, I'm not sending you on missions. So they don't all get to go together as a group. And Alec is mad at Clary because of this. But they do end up having a heart-to-heart about Alec having a bad mother. So yeah. And then Alec ends up getting a call from Magnus because somehow he got his number. I really don't know how that worked. He gets distracted because of the call because Magnus is obviously flirting with him, like, blah, blah. And then Clary ends up sneaking out. And Luke is still under investigation at his workplace because there are people turning up left and right because of Valentine, and he's trying to cover them up, but it's not going too well. And then Alec ends up catching up to Clary, like, on the street because she's just, like, walking around New York. And she's on the phone with Simon. And the reason that he went to the hotel at the end of the last episode was to just, like, look around, and it literally went nowhere, so he left. Simon is planning to meet up with Clary because she's going to her mom's apartment to look for clues. And Alex is like fighting against this plan. He's like, that's not safe. Like, the demons could show up at any time. And it is kind of an unsafe plan. So instead, Clary just goes for the emotional rebuttal. And she says, well, it must be hard being in love with Jace when you know he's straight. That is not very ally of you, girl. Girl, how do you know that Jace is straight? You know that he obviously likes women because he likes you, but he could be bi. You don't know. And Alex tries to cover this up because he's like, no, like, we're just parabatai. I left him that way. And Clary obviously knows that it's romantic because of how jealous Alec is about his attention towards her. And she's like, I don't want to deal with your bullshit. And so they just leave. And they meet up with Simon and they're trying to get into the apartment, but the like door is kind of closed off. And Simon ends up miraculously like jumping up acrobatic style to the window and stuff like that. He's way more athletic and seems to have superhuman strength that he didn't have before. Odd. They end up finding a box of something in the floorboards, and Alec hears a noise in the alleyway, so he goes out to investigate. And the noise in the alleyway turns out to be a wolf, none other than a werewolf. And when he's following it, he walks out to the street and sees Simon and Clary getting arrested by Luke's friend. This either could be Alaric or it could be just like any other people on the police force. I think it is Alaric though. And they end up taking them to a random Chinese restaurant, which is actually the werewolf headquarters. And that's because Luke is a werewolf. I think I said that before. Luke actually is part of a werewolf pack. Alaric is also part of the pack, hence why they're on the police force trying to cover shit up, you know? And since Alec now lost Clary, even though they were supposed to be at the Institute the entire time, he calls Jace, and so they have to leave their mission. And their mission was to go to the Sealy place and go talk to Meliorn specifically to get information. And I think Izzy's mom specifically sent her because she knew that Izzy was having casual sex with the guy, which, like, I'm pretty sure she also shamed her for it. So not a good mother. And the reason that they're getting information is because the Seelys actually cut off all connection from the Clave. And that is because the Clave asked for Seely scouts to be sent out to look for Valentine, and they all turned up dead. And the Clave didn't really do anything about it. And so the Seelys are like, well, fuck you guys. And so they cut off connection. Fair enough. And this is because Valentine is still on his experimenting shit with like downworlder blood and stuff. And so that's why he killed all the Seelys and all that. When we cut back to him doing experimenting stuff, he's talking in Russian. Okay, random poll, like, and through this meeting that they have with Meliorn, they just realize that, like, the Seelys believe that the Shadowhunters can protect them. Fair enough. When they finally meet back up with Alec, Jace yells at him, like, relentlessly about losing Clary and, like, putting her in danger or whatever, and Alec snaps back and says, like, oh, well, like, your feelings for Clary are clouding you seeing, like, the trio right here, because, like, they usually do missions all together. They low-key do be, like, siblings, but to Alec, that's a little different for Jace, obviously. And they try doing a parabatai tracking on Clary, because the tracking for that is more strong, and she doesn't show up. And back at the Chinese restaurant, they're interrogating Clary to see the information of the Mortal Cup, and obviously she doesn't know it because she's looking for it, and so they're not getting anything out of her. And they're trying to use Simon as leverage because they obviously know that she cares for him, and they put him in a cell. They threaten Clary with a, like, literal werewolf, like one of the members of the pack, and say that it will kill Simon if she doesn't tell them where it is. And so she lies and says that it's underneath the floorboards in the apartment. And the main guy who's, like, in charge of this whole, like, interrogation business, he's, like, this big scary guy. He stays there and sends someone else to go look at the apartment and is going to kill Simon if she's lying. And lucky for her, Simon is left alone in the cell and now has superhuman strength. So he just breaks out of his binds and finds a phone somehow. And he calls the gang over here because they have Clary's phone, because they have Clary's bag. And he basically leads them to it by talking about a menu that's in the cell that he's in, and it's of the Chinese restaurant, so they know where to go. And he sets a diversion by setting off the fire alarm, so Clary gets taken out of the restaurant. And she gets thrown into a storage container out in the back lot, and she tries to break out with a rune. And that's because you can draw runes on yourself, but you can also draw runes on like the wall and stuff, and that can be like unlocking runes. Very similar to like Harry Potter spells, if you will. And this is weird because Clary doesn't know any runes. She is new to this world, obviously. They have to like learn them as children. That's like their school, if you will, is learning what different runes mean and how to draw them. And Clary doesn't know any, but she randomly just draws this one on the wall. And none other than Luke actually finds Clary and ends up kidnapping her again. But they get caught by Jace and Alec, who knock out Luke, and then Izzy finds Simon inside the place. And they get surrounded by the whole thing of werewolves, and the main guy who was like leading the interrogation, he's the alpha of the pack. And he's about to like jump at them, but then Luke jumps in and kills the alpha, as a wolf specifically. And killing the alpha makes him the new alpha, but he's about to die from his injuries. So they're like trying to not have that happen. And Clary, of course, is connected to Luke, and she realizes that he's might not be evil anymore. And so she wants to like nurse him back to life, if you will, not have him die from his injuries. And Alec and Jace have another argument about how Alec wants to take Clary back to the Institute, report to the government, all that business. And then Jace is like, no, I'm going to help Clary, as he's done this whole season. And he also says that he's better off on his own anyway. So they divide, if you will. Apparently, the only thing that can cure an alpha's bite, because that's what Luke is specifically dying from, can only be healed by a warlock. And so they plan to take Luke to Magnus. Episode 6 of Men and Angels. They end up getting Luke to Magnus like in his apartment, and he's in like mental la la land because he is being poisoned by the alpha's bite. Magnus needs certain things in order to cure it, and so he sends Jace and Simon together to go get them. And then he also asks for Alec to be there because he needs powerful Shadowhunter energy in order to feed his spell. AKA he's forcing that man to come see him again. So Jace calls Alec and they fight again. Go figure. Literally what is new. And then at the Institute, not only did their mom come back, but then soon after their dad came back. Robert Lightwood, certified asshole dad. Let's just say that. And he comes back with their little brother named Max, who I think I got a picture for, and he's just not up here. He's not that important. Just know he's like a little boy. And he really don't like Shadowhunter school, but like that's about it. And he just wants to go like do things with his siblings, but they're too old. And their mom seems to be on edge more because like they're having more problems with the clave right now. And Alec says that he'll help with any problems that they have because he's like a good son, I suppose, and he's constantly seeking validation from his parents. And their dad ends up talking to Isabel because that's his favorite child. And she actually generally likes her dad simply because he's nice to her, but he basically says that the Lightwood name is being like dragged through the mud in Idris because of these unsanctioned missions that are going on in New York, so they need a sacrifice in order to like fix their family name. I wonder what that will entail. In Luke's mental la la land, which turns out to be just like his past memories, him and Jocelyn are together and they both have circle runes. So not only was Jocelyn in the circles, so was Luke. And the makeup department actually slayed with these circle runes because, as I said, they were like on the side of their necks. They look painful because they're like red compared to other runes, which are like black. They just look like normal tattoos. But like the circle ones look like they're like protruding from the skin. It looks like it hurts. And when I say they're like his past memories, he's not actually living in his memories, but he's like living in the timeline of them. So in his head, Dream Jocelyn tells him to tell Clary everything about like what's going on in order for her to find the cup because they need it in order to take down Valentine, blah, blah, blah. He tries to tell Clary, but he's like dying avidly when he like is in and out of consciousness. And so he tells Magnus to tell her. And so Magnus explains the lore of the original Valentine story, okay, like when he made the circle and everything like that to Clary. And basically he wanted to make a new army of Shadowhunters similar to his plan now. And that's because he wanted them to follow the rules more, aka hate downworlders more. Be more racist. And then he ended up going a little bit insane, and so he started killing downworlders at a whim and breaking the accords. And at the beginning, him and Jocelyn were obviously very close. They were like an item, but then she started to realize that he was like going crazy, and so she tried to back off. And then that's what led Valentine to want to make new Shadowhunters because the current ones weren't listening to him. And so he stole the Mortal Cup, which was like a prized possession in the Shadowhunter world. So that was a big betrayal. They like cast him out because of that. And Jocelyn and Luke tried to stop him from doing this, but they weren't successful. And so she ends up stealing the cup from him as well as quitting being a Shadowhunter in order to go into hiding and hide it from him. And that's when obviously she gives birth to Clary, ends up raising her as a mundane in New York. And then back at the Institute, back to the sacrificing thing with the Lightwood name, Izzy tells Alec that it's actually an arranged marriage, and that's his job to deal with. So he has to get an arranged marriage in order to fix their family name. As I said, they really fuck with the Magnus and Alec story in this season. Exhibit A. This doesn't happen in the books, I'll tell you that much. And then Isabel also has to change things about herself because she's been like a diplomat now, which means like a very like fancy by the book person and like run the Institute, if you will. And she doesn't get to have like hookups anymore. And they're kind of like stripping her of her identity a little bit because she like wears revealing clothing. And her mom says like, no, you can't do that, which is like weird. And Alec is mad at her for not being mad enough that he has to get married. because like that is objectively crazy. And then Alec ends up actually going to Magnus's because originally he was like not going to help them with their silly spell, but he goes because he's pissed off. And then him and Magnus have a cute little moment because he like saves Magnus from almost passing out because he like transfers some of his Shadowhunter energy to him.
Help me. I need your strength. Take what you need.
And then Jace and Simon end up getting back right in time after they're arguing, delaying their journey a lot. But they give Luke the potion, and so he is healed. And then Clary and Alec end up having a convo about how Alec did this for him rather than for Jace. So he's getting past his unrequited love, if you will, and good for him. And then Jace and Clary have a moment after this as well because Clary's excited that her father figure isn't dead. They do just be having flirty vibes often. And then Simon sees this, so he gets mad and he dips out. And this is also because he's going a little bit crazy, aka he saw his own dead body in an alleyway earlier. I wonder what that's about. Okay, until Lark is coming back in the freaking narrative, he's staying on the floor. He's pissing me off. And back at the Institute, Izzy's the only one back there with her parents, and her mom calls her a slut and gives her a half-ass apology. Right. This is because Izzy was fighting for Alec not to have an arranged marriage because she was like, he really wouldn't like that, but her mom is not backing down.
We can't back down, not right now, we can't back down.
And then Luke, now conscious because he got healed, it tells Clary a little bit more of the story of Valentine because he reveals that the story of him going insane wasn't entirely just because he was like crazy, it was also because of a love affair. So it turns out that Luke and Jocelyn actually fell in love while Jocelyn was married to Valentine. And this was kind of during the era that Valentine was going off the deep end already. So Jocelyn was kind of willing to cheat on him, if you will. And also, I would cheat on him, Hottie McHottie over here versus Bald Man. He was still bald back then too. And this is the extra betrayal because Luke was actually his parabatai. Luke used to be a Shadowhunter and he was Valentine's parabatai, and then he ended up getting with his wife. So big betrayal. Valentine did not take it well. And so when Valentine found out, he wanted to win Jocelyn back, if you will, and so he tried to make himself a better soldier. And this is where he started experimenting with Downworlder blood. He was experimenting on himself specifically with no trial run. So he was just throwing stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. And this leads him to try to kill Luke because he's trying to get him out of the narrative, if you will. And so he traps him in a room full of werewolves. And when Luke survives this, he tries to kill him again. The reason that it's comically evil that Valentine specifically tried to kill Luke by putting him into a group of werewolves is because you can die, obviously, from being attacked by werewolves, but more often than not, you just get bit and then turned into a werewolf. And that's what happened to Luke. And so he lost his Shadowhunter abilities because he became a werewolf. So Valentine was basically like banishing him from their society by putting him in there. And this leads to when he actually stole the cup and Jocelyn took it and ran. So yeah, it literally was just a love triangle from the beginning. These two are cutie, not gonna lie. I really don't know why they wouldn't tell Clary that they were just like together. I think it's because Jocelyn didn't want to be like fully together because of the whole being in hiding business. Anyway, after getting called a slut by her own mother, Isabel went fully diplomat. She's like wearing non-revealing clothing, only talking in like professional senses. And honestly, they take away her slay. They take away her life. And back at Magnus's, Alec is staying longer. And they end up having drinks together and they're very cutie. And Alec asks why Magnus specifically asked for him because he just needed Shadowhunter energy. It could have been anyone. And Magnus just says like straight up, I like you. That's why. Magnus actually reveals that he swore not to have feelings for anyone until he met Alec. Literally love at first sight. Because like he saw him in the club. He's like, I actually like, I have to break my rule for that man. And then Alex says that he doesn't quite know what he feels. All he knows is that he feels like something different. And Magnus says that's completely fine. He doesn't have to figure it out specifically. And Clary shows Luke the box that they found underneath the floorboards in the apartment, and it has the initials JC on it. And he says that this stands for Jonathan Christopher, which is Clary's brother. Big gag because she didn't know she had a brother. And Luke says that her brother actually died in a fire that Valentine set, therefore saying that Valentine killed his own son. And when Clary finds this out, she's so gagged, she like accidentally pushes down on the box and it's on top of a piece of paper. And when she pushes down, the box ends up turning into a drawing in the piece of paper, which is like a special Shadowhunter power. She sees this happen, she's like, oh my god, I know where the cup is. In episode 7, Major Arcana, Clary says to Luke that one of Dot's tarot cards that she had, because she has like a shop next to their apartment that has like magic-esque stuff, including tarot. And one of her cards looks exactly like the Mortal Cup, or at least that's how it's described to her, meaning the cup is probably hidden inside of it, because if Clary has this power, most likely her mom does. So her mom hid the cup inside of said card. And Luke says that the cards, because Dot is actually dead, are inside his desk in the police station. So they have to get in there and be discreet about it because Luke is already under investigation. And then we get to fuck ass Simon, who went to go hook up with Maureen because he wanted to get over Clary. Right. This becomes very apparent when he's talking to Maureen in the morning and fully imagines Clary in front of him when she's speaking. Weird, you're being weird. And then because Maureen already asked to date him before this happened, she asked Simon when he's going to ask her to be his girlfriend because like she assumes that if he had sex with her, that was like going to be the next step. And then Simon actually says Clary's name, so she gets respectively mad at him for this. And then he rushes out of the room because he's looking embarrassed by this, but then he also promises that she's not just a hookup. We'll see. Luke goes into the precinct to get the cards just because he's like, it'll be quick in and out, it'll be easy. But then he actually gets arrested by internal affairs because they suspect him for murder. Not great. And Jace is now along for the ride for this, and so Jace and Clary go in without him, and Luke just says to go get the cards and get out. Like, don't worry about him. And back at the Institute, Alec is absolutely nowhere to be found, and Isabel is still in her like diplomat era, being boring, being weird, being like Alec at the beginning of the season. And don't piss me off. And then Alec eventually comes back in the morning because he actually slept over at Magnus's place. And nothing happened except for the cocktails. But like, that's my ship and they're flirting. And then Izzy reveals to Alec that she actually broke up. I guess they were kind of exclusive, but she broke up with Meliorn because I guess they aren't allowed to have outside of Shadowhunter relationships. Again, oppressive government, they're racist. Alex says that she shouldn't have to change who she is for just the family image. And she says like, no, it's fine because I don't want you to have to get arranged marriage, which is very nice of her. But he's now coming to terms with himself, with like feelings for Jace, feelings for Magnus, things. So he's like very like against this. And so because of this, Isabel's like, you shouldn't have to change who you are, meaning you shouldn't have to get an arranged marriage. And then she's also questioning where Jace and Clary are because they're like MIA. And Jace and Clary are currently hiding in a closet in the precinct because they can't get caught. And they end up having a very like flirty conversation because they're trapped in a closet together. And then Clary comes up with a plan to just get the cards in plain sight because she's been at the police station before. She obviously knows Luke. And so they're like, they're not going to suspect me. I'm just a normal girl. Also, she looks diva in this scene. She looks so good. The plan is for Clary to act like Jace is her boyfriend and they're having a fight. So she's like running through the police station like, no, get away from me. We're done with this.
You son of a bitch! Oh. Stop following me!
I have to be discreet.
Wait, what did you say? You cheated on me?
I did not.
And then she claims to be looking through his desk for like her house keys or something. And all the stuff in his desk ended up getting wiped anyway, so it didn't really matter in the end. And they end up calling Alec and Izzy for backup because they need a way to get into the stuff that's like hidden away in order to get the cards. And while they're thinking of a new plan, Simon ends up calling Clary because he's in full hallucination territory right now. He's not doing well. At this point, he's now well aware. He's like, oh, I'm turning into a vampire. The signs are finally pointing to it for him with like the bleeding mouth, the visions of Camille, the general hallucinations of his dead body, stuff like that. And before he's about to say this, Jace actually takes her phone. Clary just thinks that he has like the flu or something because he's like, oh, I'm like really sick, like something's going on. And she does not care that much. And they finally let Luke go from questioning when they're like questioning about his murder case, I suppose. And he actually finds a dead body in his office, like in one of the closets. Not looking good for him. And it turns out that the cop was actually killed by a demon, probably inside of the police station, so they have to keep an eye out. When Simon gets home, his family has an intervention with him because they think he's on drugs because he's like hallucinating things and overall not doing well. And then he has a crash out about this, and so he ends up breaking his desk in half. And finally, at the precinct, they think of a plan, and so Jace and Clary plan to sneak into the vault while Izzy and Alec are the distraction at the front. And Alec turns out to be the distraction because the receptionist thinks that he's hot, respectively so, and he's doing some very, very poor flirting. And then Izzy teases him about asking out Magnus because she's well aware of her brother's romantic interests, especially towards Jace. She was well aware the entire time, and she was just feeling bad for him because it was unrequited the entire time. And Jace and Clary are currently in an elevator to get down to the vault. She chooses to put a rune on her back for some reason. I really don't know why she couldn't put it on her arm. They can put them anywhere, by the way. And she can't reach it because of that. And so he has to do it for her. In my opinion, she was asking for that situation. And then eventually she like turns around and she's like staring at him. They're flirting. And then the lights go out. They end up getting into the vault and they find the cards. And then Jace yells at her for taking forever because she's looking through all of them. And like just looking at the pictures and being, I remember this one. And he's like, we got to get a move on, girl. And Claire's having trouble right then and there trying to pull it out of the card. And so they just go back to Alec and Izzy and decide that they're going to figure it out later. And there's a bunch of demons there, I suppose, sent by Valentine, attracted to them in general, a whole thing. And they end up getting chased by like these scorpion looking demons. And then Clary run ahead because she has the cup in her possession, but then she ends up getting cornered and pulls the cup out of the card just because she's like stressed, and she just does it perfectly. Because she has the cup, she wards off the demons because the cup controls the demons. And then she goes back to find Jace and she's like, hey, like I got the cup, like it's great. And then he's like, oh, give it to me for safekeeping until we get back to the Institute. And she's like, that's suspicious. So she stabs him. And at first it seems like actual Jace was stabbed and she's like, oh, like I guess I read him wrong. I thought this was a demon. And then it turns out it is a demon. He was just pretending to be Jace. Very traumatic though. Like she like fully believed that she stabbed Jace for like a solid 10 seconds. And so after this, she very much wants to get out of there because she's like a traumatic experience. Literally need to leave right now. And Luke and Alec find her after this. And they all go back to the Institute and like meet up because like they all got split up during this whole demon chase situation. And Jace is very excited to see Clary because he was worried about her. And she's trying to explain the situation with like the shape-shifting demon. And he like laughs it off. He's like, oh, that was a risk. Like you could have stabbed me. And then she kisses him. Bold, but okay. And this is in front of a lot of people I'd like to mention, including Alec. And Simon's family goes to check on him again because he's like been holed up in his room because they think they're like he's going through withdrawals on drugs. And he actually jumped out the window and broke everything in there. And that's because he's hallucinating still, and he grew fangs. And he specifically broke out to go back to the Hotel du Mort to talk to Camille because he's like, "What's happening to me?" And she just says that it's because of her blood in his system, because like when he was like biting her neck, breaking skin, that led to her blood getting in his system. And she says like, you'll go back to normal. But then she takes it back. She's like, well, you would be normal. And then she jumps at him. So if he hadn't gone to go see her, then it would have just gone away. In episode 8, Bad Blood, Clary ends up convincing Alec to keep the cup in the Institute rather than giving it to the Clave in Idris. They get a security alert that someone's in the perimeter of the Institute, so they go out to check it out, and it turns out to be Raphael with Simon's dead body. Gag it. And it turns out that Camille, when she jumped at him, end of last episode, actually did kill him. So now he's in a state of transition where he could become a vampire. And it's all up to Clary whether she has to stake her childhood best friend through the heart, killing him, or make him a vampire against his will, basically, because it's not up to him. He's unconscious. And on the political side of things in the Institute, the Clave still doesn't trust the Lightwoods, and so they send basically a babysitter to go run the Institute for them. And she actually comes glamorized as Valentine to test people's reactions, and Alec immediately shoots an arrow at her, which she like dodges, and her name is Lydia. And I think she was genuinely made to be a hated character because I hate this character so much, at least in the beginning. She gets better as the season goes on. She is generally kind of annoying because she's like the goody two-shoes side of Alec, just tenfold. Izzy is at least like with me. She's like, she hates Lydia straight off the bat. She's like, oh, like her vibes are not good. Izzy more hates her from the fact that she is bitch generally, but she is also trying to take control of the Institute because the Clave sent her to watch over it. And so she's like making the executive decisions when usually Izzy and Alec were behind that when their parents weren't there. And the Chinese restaurant gets attacked by a group of demons that are like freaky looking. They're gross. And the Institute gets notified by Luke sending Alec a text because that's easier than like having a whole messaging system. And Lydia is mad about the fact that they're signaling each other through text, even though like it would be smart to have communication with like the alpha werewolf of the area, but whatever. And so she says that I have to see the attack for myself. And so Alec takes her with him. And Clary is on the side of just letting Simon die because she doesn't want to have him unwillingly come back to life as a vampire. And so she tries to tell his mom that he's dead, but she can't do it. And so now she's entertaining the idea of making him a vampire because she's like, well, I can't kill him. Like, I can't be doing that. And then Jay starts telling her a fuck-ass story, unrelated to this, by the way. He just starts talking. And I will read it to you because I don't think I could add the clip and it's way too long. POV, you're Clary, and you are going through a very traumatic time. There was a boy, and his father bought him a falcon for his 6th birthday. His father told him to tame the bird, make it obedient. The boy would spend every day with that falcon. It would scratch at him, make him bleed, but eventually he earned its trust. He brought the bird to his father to show that the bird would come back to him. He thought his father would be proud. His father took the falcon and snapped its neck. The boy was devastated, but he realized his father was right. He was told to tame the bird, not to love it. So Jace is obviously speaking from personal experience about his own father and his own falcon, but do we care? No, that isn't the problem at hand. Clary's like going through a very treacherous time right now. She's like, I have to decide whether to kill my best friend or to bring him back as something that he never consented to be. But it's basically all to say that Clary should think with her head instead of her heart, because Shadowhunters shouldn't trust their feelings, they should trust their judgment. But just imagine for one moment that your best friend since childhood is currently dead, and like you have to decide in a few hours' time how to propel his life forward, whether to stop it altogether or continue it as a supernatural being that he didn't want to be. He didn't want to be part of the Shadowhunter world and stuff. Then your situationships start preaching about a dead falcon from his childhood. No lie, I literally had to stop watching the show at this moment and like go and take a walk because I was so pissed at this man. It's like after this that he starts to piss me off more than usual. He's an interesting character to say the least, but he is also a very annoying character. Alec becomes better after this, in my opinion, and Jace becomes worse. And Clary was really into the story when he was telling it too. Like, have your priorities, girl. Anyway, after this story, Clary says that being a Shadowhunter sounds like being dead inside, and she doesn't want to do that. She wants to actually like use her feelings for decisions rather than just going off what's the better judgment call. While on the lookout mission, Lydia and Alec are talking about Idris and all that because that's where she's normally based out of. She just came to New York for her assignment. And she's talking about how everyone wants to meet Alec in Idris because they say that he's looking for a wife, and that's simply because of his parents. And he expresses that he's not thrilled about this because it's an arranged marriage, and she relates because she's like, yeah, I was almost in an arranged marriage myself. And she explains that she ended up going against her parents and marrying the love of her life, and he ended up getting killed in battle. I get that she went through a traumatic time, but that doesn't mean you have to be a bitch to everyone. Not an excuse for me to like her. Anyway, this is all to say that she says, yeah, don't marry for love, just marry for work. Because marrying for love will only lead you to heartbreak. That's when your significant other dies. It won't happen every time. And they go in to scout out the attack that went on the Chinese restaurant, and there's a body there. And so Lydia wants to take it back to the Institute, and Luke is like stopping her from taking charge because he's like, who the hell are you? Like, why are you leading this lookout? And then Alec just says like, oh, it's her thing now. She's running the Institute right now. And they theorize that Valentine is now going after ex-Circle members for like basically going against him after he disappeared, because they rejoined the like Shadowhunter world, if you will, without holding to his ideals. But they end up putting extra wards on the Institute because of this. And Alec thinks it's for Hodge because he thinks it's the only ex-Circle member in the Institute. When he's talking to Lydia about this, she says, oh yeah, and also for your parents. And to say the least, he is gapped because he had no idea that his parents were part of the Circle. And that's also the reason that they're not really trusted in the Shadowhunter world. It's not only because of his decisions with the Institute, and that's what his parents were kind of supporting before. They didn't tell their children about any of their past disputes, and that's the reason why the Clave doesn't really trust them, because Valentine is now out again, and so they think that the Lightwoods are going to like betray them. And they also need a warlock because they want to do an autopsy of the thing that Lydia got from the werewolf attack, and it's called a Forsaken. It's basically a really big demon that's freaky looking, and they basically want to look if the Forsaken was made with magic. And so Magnus comes to the Institute because Alec has his contact, and Magnus and Isabel are talking about Alec in general because of course Magnus is asking about him. And she reveals that they're actually trying to set him up with a wife, and Magnus is not very happy about that, obviously. And so after this, Magnus specifically goes to talk to Alec, and then it catches him training shirtless. And they have a talk about the whole arranged marriage business. And then Magnus tells him to follow his heart. So the opposite advice of Lydia. And then Alec also learns that they are taking full ownership away of the Institute from the Lightwoods because of the ex-Circle member attacks. Because if the Lightwoods aren't in charge of the Institute, then they won't attack the Institute. And Alec is extra mad only from the fact that he just found out this information, and now it's like taking away what used to be his. And this makes Alec think of the grand plan of marrying Lydia as an arranged marriage so that she can run an institute like she always wanted, because that was like what she wanted to do with her husband before he died, and also his family can keep the institute because she would be in charge of it. And he doesn't think about this too hard, doesn't talk to anyone, and so he proposes right then and there. And Clary ultimately decides it's now like sunrise, so it's the final decision time. They decide to bury Simon. So he wakes up as a vampire, aka he like claws out of his grave. He resurrects all fine. He's well and not really alive, but he is now a bloodthirsty vampire. And while this is happening, Isabel is, I guess, doing an autopsy of the Forsaken herself. She is a very multifaceted woman. She can do a lot at that institute, but she is doing an autopsy, realizes that the blood inside the Forsaken is angel blood, and anything with angel blood can make it inside of the institute with like, it doesn't really alert the wards necessarily. And so she realizes that if another Forsaken were to attack, it could enter the Institute. And while she's making this realization, another Forsaken indeed does attack the Institute. And it specifically goes into the training facilities where Hodge is, because he is in charge of training. Also, now just realizing that I didn't get a picture of Hodge, in hindsight, should have. And then Alec realizes that something is attacking the Institute, so he goes in and helps Hodge kill it. At the graveyard, Simon finally comes to his senses of like being alive after getting some blood in him, and he realizes that he's a vampire. And he is now repulsed with himself, and so he's like, Clary, stay away from me. Like, I'm weird now, I suppose. But he was always weird. Also, vampires apparently can't say the word God, and so they have to like relearn it over time. I'm pretty sure like Raphael can say it now, because he's like, been a vampire for a while. But Simon's freaking out specifically because he can't say, oh my god. And because Claire doesn't really know how to deal with a newborn vampire, like she has no experience in this, Raphael agrees to take Simon and watch over him, if you will. Now Simon gets a new look because he dropped the glasses, and look, he entered hot Simon era. He was hot before, but now he's like less weird as a vampire, to be honest, and I like him better now. I should take a break for one, sit down and to charge my phone, but also to watch an hour worth of TikTok. I'm not used to standing up for these type of things. Usually I sit down for all of my recap videos that take forever to film, but here we are. In episode 9, Rise Up, Simon is avidly running away from Raphael because he sees himself as a monster who doesn't want to be helped, and he's like, I don't deserve your help. And Raphael tells him to just like accept who he is at this point, because there's not much they can do. Like, he either has to be a vampire or get staked through the heart. So there's not much choice. And then Simon just throws him against a van and then runs away all weird. And then after this, Jace and Clary come out of the graveyard, and they yell at Raphael for letting Simon get away. Mostly Clary, because she's concerned about his whereabouts. And Jace calls Alec, but Alec is healing from the Forsaken attack because he got a little banged up. And so Izzy answers the phone and says, like, you need to come home right now because there was a Forsaken attack against the Institute. And so this creates a argument between Jace and Clary, because Clary wants to go look for Simon, but Jace has to go back to the Institute because he's like, my family's in danger. And Jace, of course, has to go back to the Institute. There's like no choice in that. And so he just tells Clary to go ask Luke for help because werewolves are good at tracking things. So Luke can help her track down Simon. And then at the end, he asks her to be safe because her weird and flirting. And then she says they need to talk about them in general, and then they kiss again. And they obviously don't have time to talk about their relationship status right now. And then she says some fuck ass line.
Excellent talk.
Magnus is patching the wards at the Institute because obviously the Forsaken got through them, and he's fixing them up. And then he offers to heal Alec because he has magic that could help the healing process, and he do be flirting. Alec is very dismissive of this advance because he's like in an arranged marriage now, blah, blah, blah. And Magnus leaves by saying that he would love to meet Lydia. Speaking of Lydia, she invites Meliorn over to the Institute in order to arrest him. Like, that's the intention. And Isabel is very against this because, like, she obviously knows Meliorn well, not only because they hook up, but also because, like, she values him as a friend and she doesn't want him to get arrested. And Isabel is complaining to Alec about this when Jace finally shows up back at the Institute. And then she rehashes the whole story of, like, Lydia taking over the Institute because of political drama, blah, blah, blah. And then Alec, who had not told anyone this information, says, well, maybe she should be taking over because our parents were ex-circle members. And they didn't know that before. And right after this, Lydia walks in the room and she's like, oh, like, have you told them? And they're like, tell us what? He drops that they're engaged as well. So they're learning that this woman that's taking over what they thought was like their family legacy, so to speak, is actually inviting someone over in order to arrest them, doing some evil clave activities, and then also engaged to Alec. Izzy is really mad because she didn't want Alec to have an arranged marriage. Fair enough. And then Jace is mad simply because he doesn't like Lydia. And so he's like, oh, like, why are you meeting her? With Simon decided to go home for some reason. He goes to his room and he's like staring at a blank wall because he's like crashing out. And his mom finds him and goes like hug him because he's been gone for a while, escaped out of his window, and she's like concerned that he died. And the problem is that he's now like bloodthirsty because he is like a freshly born vampire, and so he almost bites her neck because of it. Lucky timing, Clary ends up figuring that he was home, and so she ends up finding him there before he does anything that he would regret. She makes up an excuse that like her identity got stolen, so Simon has to come help her. And Simon's mom is very hesitant about this because he's already been like out and about. She thinks he was doing drugs, all that. And at the Institute, the news of Lydia and Alec's engagement finally like gets out to the masses, if you will. AKA his dad tells Alec, basically yells at him for not telling him about their engagement and also for being engaged to Lydia because in their mind she's like the one taking over their family legacy. And then Alec basically fires back with like, oh, well, I'm trying to fix the name that you put into the ground by being in the circle. Loki ate him up. And overall, everyone's arguing because Clary and Simon are also arguing about how she brought him back to be a vampire and he doesn't like his life now. And not only that, he's like, well, like, it's your fault. And so he doesn't like want to talk to her anymore. And at the Institute, they finally take Meliorn in for questioning. And so like, they're not arresting him outright, but they're like keeping him for questioning, so they practically are. And Jace ends up agreeing with Alec. So then Izzy's like, oh, so you're taking his side now. And then he's like, well, I'm not taking any side. I'm Switzerland. AKA he's literally Bella Swan in Eclipse.
We're done here. No, you're done here.
Stop! I'm tired of this. From now on, I'm Switzerland, okay?
And Meliorn reveals to Lydia and the higher-ups at the Institute that Clary has the cup. And so they start searching her room for it. And Jace gets mad because they're like rifling through her bras and stuff. And Alec is being very dismissive, pissy, and rude about the whole situation. And because of the situation, the Clave now thinks that Clary is working with Valentine and keeping the cup for herself. So Jace gives her a call and says like, draw this rune on yourself because it will protect you from being tracked. So then they can't find you and go like arrest you. And at this point, Clary is with Simon and Luke because they're like trying to figure out a place for Simon to be that won't like make him crazy. And then they actually end up asking Raphael to stay at the Hotel Dumar because Simon will be safe there and they wouldn't think to look for Clary there. And Raphael says yes as long as Luke isn't there because werewolves and vampires like constantly beef. Again, Twilight reference. And the cup is obviously in the Institute and Jason and Izzy are scared that Alec is going to give its location away and he was the one who locked it up, meaning his stele is the only one that can open where it is. He's so like government brained right now that they know that if they ask, he will automatically give up the location if they're going to steal it. And so they asked Magnus to do it instead. And in the Dumor, Raphael just ends up putting Clary and Simon into a cell instead of like a room, so to speak. And Simon eventually caves and just drinks blood because he's about to kill Clary if he doesn't. And this was like Raphael's big plan. And this was like his pushing point to teach Simon that he just has to drink blood now. And this is actually really easy for Magnus because he just like peeks inside Alec's room, teleports his stele to Jace. And it's as simple as that. Once Jace gets the cup out, he just teleports it back. So then Alec has no idea what happened. But Alec does catch Magnus outside of his room. And so Magnus just like covers for it by saying that he wanted to talk to him. And they talk about the advice that he gave him last episode, aka follow your heart. And Magnus also name drops Sigmund Freud in this conversation, aka psychology's #1 freak. If you don't know, he just related everything in human psychology to sex. And my personal theory is because he did that simply because he wasn't getting any. And at this point, Magnus is unaware of the engagement. He just thinks that Alec is still toying around with the idea of an arranged marriage in his head, not necessarily that he got engaged. And so Alec tells him, he's like, oh yeah, I'm getting married, like related to your advice. Magnus makes a joke. He's like, oh, like at least take me to dinner first. Like he's really hopeful that he's talking about him because like they shared like some 30 moments, you know? And then Alec's like, no, I'm getting married to Lydia. Actually, heartbreaking. And when Magnus is talking about this, he was like so ready to be in a secret relationship with Alec because of like his parents and whole Shadowhunter world and everything. And Alec's just like, oh yeah, like I'm getting married to Lydia because it's convenient for the Institute and for her. And Magnus crushed, respectively so. And, like generally that is so comically evil of Alec to do. It's the right thing to tell him the truth, at least, I suppose.
I proposed to Lydia. That's interesting. It makes sense. It's a solid partnership for both of us. Solid partnership. That's hot. Well, okay then. Congratulations. Marriage is a wonderful institution. Not that I would know. Goodbye, Alexander.
And at this point, Lydia is now deciding to send Meliorn off to get tortured by the Silent Brothers to get the truth out of him because they don't believe him. Even though Seelys can't lie. They can bend the truth, but they can't like outright lie. And so all the stuff he's saying has some sort of truth in it. And they want to go put him under the sword at the Silent Brothers, which is like really harmful, I think, to people who aren't Shadowhunters. And Alec has one thought of compassion and asks Lydia if they really have to go that far. And she's like, well, yeah. And she thinks that this is the best solution because her fiance, I guess they weren't married. Sorry, I said husband earlier, but her fiance died because of a demon attack when they didn't get information out of a warlock. Like they didn't torture it out of him because they were like, oh, that's like, we shouldn't torture it. But then her fiance died because it was an ambush of a demon attack. They would have known if they got the information out of a warlock. At the same time, like torture doesn't right that wrong, you know? It's like not the situation at all, but it works on Alec because he's now full government. He's like, I don't care what it takes. We're going to stop Valentine. Right. On the side of the oppressive government. In their little cell at the Hotel du Mort, Simon and Clary are having a heart-to-heart about how he's a vampire now, and she's like, I get it if you hate me because I made this decision for you. And then he's like, angry at you. Yes. Hate you. Never. He's gross and he's weird. Izzy and Jace end up picking them up from the hotel and explaining the whole situation about how like Clary's under thing and Lydia's situation, the Meliorn situation, all that. And they have the cup with them, obviously. And they're planning to rescue Meliorn before he gets sent off to the Silent Brothers, but they need backup, hence why they're getting Simon and Clary. And Clary asks Raphael for backup as well, in exchange for an alliance with the Seelys and the werewolves. Raphael agrees to this, but also on the terms that Simon pledges his allegiance to Raphael specifically and joins the clan of the vampires that live at the du Mort. And Simon agrees to this because he's sacrificing himself for the good of the downworld. Good character traits, dare I say. They're coming up once he becomes a vampire. That's all I'm gonna say. Look at Raphael with a few like freaky one-liners back and forth. Dare I say a rivalry. Anyway, they end up ambushing Alec with Meliorn, I think, when he's like about to hand him off to the Silent Brothers. And they like split them up so then specifically Jace and Clary can talk to Alec. And then Jace ends up letting Clary and Meliorn get away when he's like tussling with Alec. And then Jace claims that like all the problems with Alec going on right now, like government brained, all stuff like that, is because Alec likes him, which I feel like is a hate crime. Because like now he's coming to the realization, he's like, oh, like Alec is in love with me romantically. But like, why are you bringing it up in respect to this? This is obviously some other things other than the fact that Alec is like jealous of your relationship with Clary. It's completely different. So this feels like a hate crime. This feels evil. And then this comment makes them tussle a little bit more, respectively so. And then Alec has Jace at like knife point. Jace says to just kill him because he wouldn't want to be in a world where him and Alec are on opposite sides. Very parabatai of them. And Alec chickens out of killing him because that's his long-standing crush and also like his best friend for most of childhood. But he says that he's not joining them because they're still breaking the law. And then Simon and Clary have a goodbye at the hotel because Simon has to stay there now that he's with the vampires. And Meliorn tells Clary that he has a way of finding Valentine. Episode 10, This World Inverted. Meliorn tells Clary that the way to find Valentine is using the necklace that she has, and it will lead her to a portal that will lead to Valentine. This portal is inside of an alternate reality portal. Like you have to go through a separate portal to get to the portal where Shadowhunters don't exist. And when she enters that alternate reality, she will be in the body of the alternate reality Clary, meaning she also won't be a Shadowhunter. And if she forgets what her objective is in the alternate reality, she will just morph into the other Clary, and then she will cease to exist in the current reality. While they're having this insane conversation, Simon goes to talk to Luke's pack because he convinces Raphael to let him be like a spokesperson, if you will, to like different groups. And Luke's pack is no longer talking to him because he's a vampire, even though they know him. Like they knew him before he was turned. They just don't care because he's a vampire now. He also refers to himself as Nerdferatu. Rip to Simon Lewis, you would have loved the movie Nosferatu. Clary ends up entering the portal for the alternate reality. It's like through a Sealy entrance. That's why Melioran was in charge of this thing, because like he can open the portal. And Jace is also there, but he's staying on the outside of the portal, like waiting for Clary to come back. Clary comes to in the kitchen of her apartment with both her parents. So both her mom and Valentine, but neither of them are Shadowhunters. So Valentine was evil or any of that. And she ends up leaving when she sees a commercial on the TV for Magnus Bane's tarot reading. And it like makes her lock in to the objective that she has. And she goes to find Magnus. And on her way there, she ends up bumping into Simon, who's hanging out with Alec and Izzy, which is weird. Isabel is actually a nerd in this reality, and she talks about tech all the time. And she's wearing like a Star Wars shirt. It's very much anti-Isabel. She also has a crush on Clary's dad, canonically. Like, she has a crush on this man because he's like a tech billionaire or something. And Alec is just like a normal guy, objectively. Like, he has nothing very special about him. I guess there's not really like an anti-Alec unless it was like a really outgoing guy. Alternate reality Jace is just also a normal guy, but he's working at a coffee shop and he happens to be dating Clary. This does scare Clary a little bit because he like comes up and like kisses her and she's like, whoa, who is this guy? And after getting distracted kissing Jace, she almost forgets where she's going, but then she's like, oh, I gotta go. And then she goes and finds Magnus and she pretends to just want like a tarot reading, but then explains the whole situation to him because he's still a warlock, just only Shadowhunters don't exist. So he's still a warlock, but he can't really help her because he says that his magic has gone dormant because he doesn't really need it. And then he uses a potion with like his spell books that he has to reignite his powers and also reignite the energy in Clary's necklace that she has, which will lead her to the portal. And then he tells her that the necklace is leading her to the basement of the Institute, which is now like the tech headquarters that Clary's dad owns. And so she's like, oh, easy. He's having a party there tonight, so I can get to the basement. And she tells Magnus to meet her there because like he can help her open the portal, but she is distracted at the party because she's talking to Jace and she's getting confused between realities because she likes dating Jace. The part of the throwing is Alice Through the Looking Glass themed because he's like, as I said, a tech billionaire who made a 4D internet with the help of Isabel. Like, she was like second in command for this, which is insane because she's like 20 or something. Unironically, really funny from the fact that the new Descendants movie is about an alternate reality that they created, and it's based in Wonderland, aka Alice Through the Looking Glass. I'm not going to say that Disney stole something, but I'm not going to say that they didn't. And back in normal reality, Clary's going through all this simply by herself. There's drama at the Institute because Isabel is basically under arrest for treason for saving Melioran's life by like getting him out of his torture fate, if you will. And Lydia is like spearheading this. She's like, yeah, you did treason, so you're like under arrest. They're basically like keeping her on house arrest. And they're going to have a trial for her. Isabel is now mad at Alec because of this. He's trying to not get his sister, convicted for treason, but he also can't do much against Lydia. And then at the alternate reality portal, it's still open because they have to keep it open for Clary to get out, but it attracts demons the longer that it is open. So Melioran and Jace have to fight off the demons that are coming to it. But while they're like prepping for this fight or whatever, like Jace is like, oh, it's fine, I kill demons all the time. Alec finds out that he stole the cup, and so he's trying to track him, but Jace used like the rune that stops him from being tracked. But Alec can break through that with their parabatai bond because if he activates it, then he can track Jace better. The problem with this is that it weakens both of them, so Jace wouldn't be fully equipped to fight demons, and Alec doesn't really care because he's in the comfort of the Institute. And because this weakens Jace, a demon manages to sneak past him through the portal. And this is because I think the demons are attracted to the portal to wreak havoc on the alternate reality that doesn't have Shadowhunters to protect against them, so they're like going to kill Mendanes, I suppose. And Jace jumps in after the demon to go help. And in the alternate reality, Magnus is at the party and finds Alec, and it isn't necessarily that he like walks in and then he finds him, but he only gets in because Alec sees him and wants to talk to him. And here they're flirting, and this is what they're literally endgame in every universe. And Magnus finds Clary dancing with Jace, and she's like completely out of it, like no rhyme or reason about like why she's there, and Magnus manages to snap her out of it. Her and Magnus go down to the basement together, but Jace sees them leave, and so he follows because he's like, why is my girlfriend going with this random man? And he almost gets attacked by the demon that went through the portal, but Clary like drags him behind something and is like protecting him. And this is timed with more demons going through the portal after like Jace gets his ass beat and everything. So this is when he jumps in after them, and he jumps into the body of the Jace in the alternate reality. And so he helps Clary kill the demons because he's Shadowhunter Jace. They almost get out scot-free, but then he gets stabbed by one of the demons, meaning he has demon venom in his bloodstream, which is highly poisonous and can't be fixed by a simple healing rune because of his weakened like parabatai bond. Right when this happens, Magnus manages to open the portal that's supposed to lead to Valentine, and they end up at the same place that he was experimenting on people like earlier in this season. And they find a random man trapped in a closet. He's just like locked in there. Jace recognizes him as his father. In episode 11, Blood Calls to Blood, Jace has little time to experience happiness in seeing that his father is alive because he's currently dying from demon venom. And so Clary, with the help of Jace's dad, I think his name is Michael, they get him through Valentine's portal that Michael just claims to know how to open because he was trapped by Valentine and like tortured in there, and so he like knows what was going on. And he doesn't give them a lot of information because they are currently trying to get Jace to safety, and they go to the portal to go to Luke's specifically. And at Luke's, Simon is still there because Luke is trying to help him to adapt to the fact that he only has to eat blood now. Simon's like, how am I supposed to like go out in public and do things? And Luke just gives him like meat or something, and he's like, well, just drink the blood around that. That lesson is quickly cut short when the fact that when Clary and Michael bring in a practically dead Jace who needs a blood transfusion like now. It's hard to get blood though from the fact that they can't go back to the Institute because Clary is under investigation and so is Isabel, but they don't know that yet. And at the Institute, Izzy is still mad at Alec, respectively so, because it's his fiance that is convicting her for treason. And then the person coming to do the trial is called like the Inquisitor or something. It's some higher up from the Clave, and she like is apparently ruthless in her rulings. Clary goes with Simon to the Hotel du Mort because they obviously have blood there. They're vampires. They have a good amount of human blood that I don't think they're allowed to have with the Accords, but Clary's like, I'm willing to do something illegal to keep Jace alive right now. And Simon manages to get some of this human blood from Raphael because like it's not something that he just give away, but he does some blackmail. And Raphael is so impressed that he gives Simon like practically a promotion, and it's more of like negotiation in the vampire house, I'm pretty sure. So he's basically just trying to disconnect Simon from Clary because he thinks that like he should only be connected to his vampire friends, I suppose. Jace gets his blood transfusion because they make it back in time, and he is feeling better, but he's like asleep because he almost died. His dad is talking to Clary about how Valentine had like kidnapped him and experimented on him and stuff like that. And then he says that he was part of the circle, and Valentine really loved her mom and like would have loved her as well. And she's like, that's weird, that's suspicious. But she's like looking past it, she's like, maybe this guy's just a little cuckoo after being kidnapped for so long. And also he has like a very like sweet vibe to him, so this isn't really connecting with the father that Jace had described, because with like the Falcon story and like his general comments about how his father like didn't really care about him other than the fact that he like trained him to be a really good shadow hunter. And so she goes to talk to Jace after he wakes up because of this, and she's like, I don't think that the man I was just talking to was the same father that you had. Like that, they're very different vibes. And she specifically relates this to the Falcon story, I'd like to point out. And he says it's different because they're not mundanes, so he was just like teaching him a lesson with that Falcon story. Like he wasn't evil all the time, but like from the way that Jace describes it, he was kind of evil all the time. And so she's like, I don't think that the man who just talked to me about how much he like loves his son or whatever would do those things to you. And then she somehow segues this into talking about the alternate reality that she was in, where her and Jace were dating. She like asked if that Jace was real because obviously he popped into his body eventually. And then he says some fuck-ass line about like how they're real right now. And so they start making out. Okay, why not? Later, when talking with like Luke and everyone, Jace's dad reveals that he was experimented on with downworlder blood, which enhanced his senses. So he heard from his little like cupboard that he was trapped in where Valentine's next plan was. It's in like an abandoned smallpox hospital, I'm pretty sure off the water and somewhere in New York. And Clary convinces Jace to stay, and her and Luke just like look around the place to see what the deal is. And Jace agrees only after like Clary convinces him. And while her and Luke are out by themselves, Clary is asking questions about Jace's dad because obviously Luke knew him from the circle, and she's asking questions like what he used to be like. She's like, it's not adding up. Like he is not looking like the same man that Jace was describing. And Jace said that he would rest when he was waiting, but his dad ended up training with him instead, which does not seem great, but whatever. They're like doing boxing or something. And not only are they doing like practice boxing, like his dad is like hitting back, which like great idea for the injured guy. Why not? His dad was like a complete 180 in the fact that he was like being really nice before. And he's like, yeah, you're actually like weakened by your connection with Clary, and you shouldn't be like so connected to her emotionally. From the fact that Jace agreed to stay back, and he's like, you should always be leading missions. You shouldn't be like letting her make decisions for you, which like he was injured. But then he does a weird 180 at the end as well, because he's like, but you should be happy. So like, I don't care if you're with her. But he's being passive aggressive about it. And back at the Institute, the trial is still ongoing. So Isabel needs a lawyer of some sort to defend her, and she can pick anyone she wants. Alec goes to talk to Magnus to ask if he'll do it because he is very good at convincing people. And then Magnus agrees for the price. He tells Alec, you and your bow and arrow, whatever that means. And it's more of like to prove that Alec actually cares about what he's talking about, because obviously it's like his sister that's up for trial. He's like, yeah, I'll agree to anything. I don't care. And Magnus says he'll do it. And in court, Magnus makes a case for Isabel, and the Inquisitor not very enthused. And it's mostly because she's a downworlder, even though like he's way older than her. And frankly, has superiority over her. But then Isabel has to give a case against Lydia in the whole situation of like the Meliorn. And she basically eats everyone up in the crowd because she's like, you're all racist. They were willing to torture a downworlder just simply because he was a downworlder and his life was like less important than theirs. And then Lydia is called up to the stand for Magnus to ask her questions. And he just asks the question of like, why are you doing this? And she says because it's the law. But then after hearing Isabel's speech, she's like inspired. So she's like, but it's not right. And so we shouldn't be doing it. And she gives a whole speech and she's like, we are prosecuting someone for having compassion, talking about Isabel. Following the law doesn't constitute that. So she drops the charges that she made. But then the Inquisitor is like, no, it's ultimately up to me. And like the charges still stand if the mortal cop doesn't come back here in 24 hours. So Isabel's on a little bit of a timer right now. And at this point, Clary and Luke have come back from like looking at the location. And there was a bunch of demons there when they looked. They just decided to go anyway because it's looking less busy now. But Jace's dad says it looks like a trap because there's not as many demons. And so they're going to get like ambushed. But they're going anyway because Clary really wants to get her mom back, and her mom is in there. Clary sneaks in with a cup like in her bag while the rest of the boys fight off both Valentine's goons and the demons outside. And she finds her mom asleep. And Jace and his dad end up leaving Luke to fight one of Valentine's like lackeys outside, and they get chased by demons to the room where Clary is. They're being cornered by demons, like it's a dead end room. So they tell her to use the cup, and so she pulls it out and she tells them to find Valentine, and then none of them like back off or whatever. So she's like, oh, maybe it's not working. And so Jace's dad offers, he's like, oh, like give me the cup and I'll do it and see if it works. And then once he's holding the cup, he reveals that he was actually glamored the entire time, and he was none other than Valentine the entire time. Who would have thunk it? He was acting like a completely different guy, and he just suddenly showed up at Valentine's old hiding spot. Crazy. And Clary, of course, was suspicious of this man from day one. And so the cup that she gave him was actually a fake. And so she pulls out the real cup to call off the demons. And then Valentine pulls out his final stop because Jace is really mad at him for pretending to be his father, because he's like, that was really fucked. Like, I thought my father was alive. He like made me believe that. But Valentine reveals that he was never actually pretending to be Jace's father because he's his real father. And Jace is like, that's not right because I recognized the guy that you were glamored. I was like, that's my father. And then Valentine's like, no, but I was a glamour when you were a kid too. So I'm your real father. And Jace's having a mental breakdown because Valentine seems totally serious. And if he is correct, then Jace made out with his sister this day. Now we've entered the incest arc. Sadly, this did actually happen in the books. This is source material. And both Clary and Jace are kind of shaken up about this, respectively so, because they did make out several times, and now they're finding out that they're probably brother and sister, because Valentine's story does kind of match up. Valentine manages to get away because they're both kind of crashing out about this, but he leaves Jocelyn with them. And back to the Institute plot. Switching between these two is actually wild because here's political intrigue. Oh, these people are doing incest. Anyway, Jace and Clary are choosing not to talk about this right now, so they take Jocelyn back to the Institute, and they also have the cup on them, so they give the cup to the Clave, and Isabel is now free. And this is when Alec and Jace finally have a confrontation about the whole parabatai tracking business, because obviously it weakened Jace to the point where he almost died. And so they have an argument. Alec feels betrayed because they left without him and stole the cup, blah, blah, blah. Even though he didn't want to join them, he should have known. And Jace feels betrayed, obviously, because he got weakened against his will. And Alec feels justified in the fact that he used this against Jace because he thinks that Jace is valuing Clary over Isabel. And he's like, I was protecting my sister. And then he basically disowns Jace from the family by saying, I'll go talk to my sister. And when Valentine was escaping, Jace like had him. He like easily could have killed him, but he didn't want to because he was struggling with the fact that might actually be his father. And he's like, I don't want to kill my father. So he didn't kill him, and he managed to escape via a portal. So Jace is talking to Clary about this because he's like, I should have killed him. Like, why didn't I? And now onto fun stuff. After Alec goes to talk to Izzy about her being like free because the Mortal Cup is back, she's really excited. But then he goes to talk to Magnus, who's still in the Institute, and he gives him his bow and arrow. And then Magnus tries to like finally get through to him, and he's like, you shouldn't have to get married because then we'd both be lonely. I don't think that's what you want. And he also just gives the bow back because he's like, that truly was to just see if you really cared. And also he's in love with him, and he's like, that's your bow and arrow, you keep it. And Luke now talks to Simon and is like catching him up on all of the stuff with Valentine because he wasn't there for the smallpox hospital of it all. Simon is being a complainer about like being alone for the rest of his life because he doesn't get the girl that he wants. And this is because Luke is talking about how he finally got Jocelyn back, who's like the love of his life. But Simon's being a little bit of an incel. And then we have a rare Luke L, where he tells Simon that Jace and Clary found out that they were siblings. And so he's basically like telling Simon that he has a chance because the guy that Clary liked turned out to be your brother. Which is weird. Why are you telling her business? And also, do not help the incel. Do not give him a chance with the girl. And then Clary tries to go talk to Jace, but then she chickens out because she's like, I actually don't think I want to talk about the incest that I'm having right now. It's all over her chopped ass man. Because personally, if that was my brother, I wouldn't want to date him in the first place. Also, in a plot point completely unrelated to this that I forgot to mention completely, the vampires as a collective decided that Raphael was a better leader, and so he usurped Camille and they like locked her away. That's important coming up. Just know that that happened around the time that Simon became a vampire. In episode 12, Malik, whole episode just for my favorite ship. Like, they knew. They are doing wedding preparations at the Institute because they're planning to do the wedding at the Institute. Very dreary, very sad. But Jace is mad about this because he wants to work, aka he wants to find Valentine. And Alec and Clary have a very surprisingly nice conversation, basically forgiving each other for all of the drama that they've had throughout this whole season. Magnus calls Alec only for the intention of asking him to come drink with him.
Don't make me drink alone. Don't make me drink alone. Don't make me drink alone.
And Alec knows what this is about. He knows that Magnus is trying to convince him to not get married. And Alec still comes over, even though he says no to drinking with him, and then also tells him that he's still getting married. And Magnus causes him to have gay panic on purpose because he can't admit that he's actually in love with Lydia, which we all knew. But Magnus is like, why should you have to not marry for love when you can? And Alec is finally starting to like entertain the idea of being with Magnus instead of, entering into an arranged marriage for his family's sake. And he says like, oh, I would have to give up my whole life in order to be with you because Shadowhunters and Downworlders don't really mix. And Magnus basically says, like, I won't ask you again. I won't pressure you to be in a relationship with me, but this is the last time I'm asking. And Clary goes to talk to Simon, who is withholding the fact that he knows about the whole Clary Jace situation, which is very comically evil. Because like he's pretending like he never heard it before, when in reality he like has pre-biased thing of like trying to get with Clary because of the threat of Jace is gone. Anyway, she invites Simon to be her date for Alec's wedding because she's like, oh yeah, Jace isn't really an option anymore. Clary and Jace invite Magnus over to talk about possible warlocks that put Jocelyn under her spell because they're trying to break her out of it. And vibes are very weird. And Magnus does pick up on this. He's like, oh, like I don't know like what problem you guys have, but like I don't want to be in the middle of it. And they narrow it down to a warlock named Ragnar Fell. And Magnus plans to go with Clary and Jace to go talk to him because he's in hiding. And he would trust Magnus over like some random Shadowhunters because he's in hiding, being hunted by fellow Shadowhunters in Valentine's Circle. And when they're making this plan, Lydia comes up to them and is like asking them questions. And then Alec is with her and she's asking him questions about the wedding with Magnus there. And Magnus does not want to be there. And with the wedding, Alec is especially stressed out about it because people from Idris are coming into town to be there because it's like, I guess, an important thing that a Lightwood is getting married. And Izzy is supporting Alec with whatever decision he wants because he's like so far double boots down going through with this wedding. And she's supporting him through planning the wedding and also planning him a bachelor party because Jace is not in the right mind space to be doing that with the whole I was attracted to my sister thing and also hunting down Valentine thing. And also just the fact that him and Alec are still mad at each other and so he would not be throwing him a bachelor party in any respect. Clary, Jace, and Magnus go to Ragnar's estate or whatever. It's like his hiding, some house out in the middle of nowhere because he's in hiding. And his wards are up and they only allow people with pure of heart to like enter through. And Clary makes it through no problem, but both Jace and Magnus disappear. And so she's like freaked out, but then she goes inside the house and finds Ragnar in there. And she's asking him about an antidote for the potion that he made for her mother. And then secondary, she's like, I need to find my friends that disappeared through your wards. That would be great. And while she's like making these demands, he's like, oh, like sit down. And then he's also like talking to what appears to be people, but Clary sees no one. She's like, what's going on? So she thinks that he's like insane, but it turns out to be Jace and Magnus under an invisibility spell that he was talking to the entire time. So they are in the same room now. And in order to make the antidote for Jocelyn, he needs a very like powerful warlock spell book called the Book of the White. And he had it when he made the first potion, hence why he needs it to make the antidote. But he doesn't have it anymore. And Jocelyn was the one who hid it, and so he has no idea where it is, but he says he has something in his house that will help them find it. And then when he leaves the room, he eventually like falls back off of a terrace from the upstairs, and that's because he got attacked by a demon. And Magnus isn't able to save him because he got like a puncture wound to the neck and also like fell from a high height. But Clary is hell-bent on staying in his house because she wants to find the thing that would help them find the book. But Jace says it's too dangerous because if there was one demon, there's probably some following behind. And also Magnus tells him to get out of there because he wants to like be with his dead friend, if you will. And this is because him and Ragnar like actually knew each other for a really long time because they were both immortal. And so he knows Magnus probably better than anyone else in his life. And a really heartbreaking loss for him. But he says that he'll transport all of Ragnar's magical stuff and sort through it to figure out what they need for the Book of the White, just for Clary and Jace to leave. And back at the Institute, Clary and Jace deduce that because it was a surprise attack, that someone was probably trailing them, working with Valentine in order to attack them when they were meeting with Ragnar. And the only people who knew about the mission were people at the Institute. And Jace is convinced that Lydia was the one who sold them out. And so he's convinced that she's working with Valentine, which would be very counterintuitive to the entire thing that she's been doing this entire season. But whatever, he's privy to his own opinion. And this is the only grounds he really has for this theory is that she was standing right next to them when they were talking about going. And also just because he has a problem with Alec and she's an extension of Alec right now. And Clary convinces Jace not to talk to Lydia himself and let her do it because he would be saying things that were not going to go over well. And Clary gets to asking point blank, she's like, were you the one that was in contact with Valentine that sent a demon after us? And Lydia was like, if I was working with Valentine, he would have had the cup ages ago. Why would I do that? And this argument slowly shifts into talking about the wedding because Clary's asking why it's even happening because anyone with eyes can see that Alec has feelings for Magnus. And Lydia says something about Shadowhunter tradition and like family name being more important than necessarily what someone feels. And Clary says that it's not only for love, but it's also holding back a part of Alec's identity in the fact that he doesn't like women. And Lydia does say something in the fact that she was like, I'm not forcing him into this. He proposed to me, which is true. But it is based on some like traditional bullshit in the Shadowhunter world of like having a duty to your family and like getting married and stuff like that. They do just be homophobic, not gonna lie. Also, shout out Claire for being an ally. She was like, let that man be with another man. Izzy asked Simon about people for help throwing a bachelor party because she's never had to throw one before, and he's been to many, I suppose. I wouldn't invite that guy to a bachelor party, but okay. And he says it's about like best friends being together and like a promise that the marriage isn't gonna change their relationship or something. And she ends up throwing a party that's just trapping Jace and Alec together to force them to have a conversation. And this conversation actually works wonders. They work it out on the remix. They end up talking about the whole incest situation because they never had time to. And then Jace says he must be sick if he was like falling in love with his sister because he was falling in love with Clary. And then Alex says that he wasn't sick because he didn't know, obviously. And also sometimes there's a person that just throws you off of what like you thought was your plan in life and everything. And very obvious that he's talking about Magnus and it's generally his own feelings of liking men. Now we're comparing homosexuality to incest. Right. I'm joking. Mostly. It actually is a very heartbreaking speech about how he's having to put away part of his identity at his own wedding. And he asked Jace to be the one to give him away at his wedding. Meanwhile, Magnus is back at his apartment, very much crashing out about the fact that Ragnar is dead. And he's seeing visions of Ragnar, who's talking to him about his past relationships. And he had a very emotional situationship with Camille. And Camille is very much, because I'm immortal, I'm going to be with multiple people. There's no like one love. And Magnus is a hopeless romantic, if you will. Like he has a true love many, many times in his life. And this usually makes it worse for him because he watches the people that he loves die. But Camille was just like not in it for that. And so they broke up. This vision, Ragnar ends up saying to Magnus that if he feels like he finds this love again, that he should do anything to keep it. And then hop, skip, and jump to the wedding. Vibes are awful because a man is being stripped of his identity in order for tradition's sake. Like it's not good. Also, he's up on the altar wearing a white suit. So you know things are about to get bad because it's the worst sign ever. Why does anyone wear a white suit to their wedding? I generally don't know. The ceremony goes on. Lydia walks down the aisle. Her dress isn't the best. I don't love it, but her hair is diva. And per Shadowhunter tradition, instead of rings at the wedding, they have a bracelet and a necklace. And right when they're about to do the wedding runes, which is like the actual binding part of the marriage, Magnus storms in to the wedding hall. And Alec is crashing out because of this. He's like, doesn't know what to do. Alec's mom, homophobic as she is, she's trying to get Magnus to leave because she realizes that Alec is crashing out because of his presence there. And Alec turns to Lydia up at the altar and he's like, I can't do this. It's not right. And then she isn't Alec. She never like wanted to force him into this. She just like was going along with it because he proposed to her and he was saying that he was willing to do it for her sake and his family's sake. But she's like, you deserve to be happy and I'll be fine. And she's masking a little bit. She is upset objectively because anyone would be from being left at the altar, especially when people from like Idris were there and stuff like that. But Alec walks right past all of his family and then kisses Magnus in front of everyone. That's my token gay ship right there. I know Cassandra Clare wasn't willing to write anymore, but like that's my token gay ship. His parents, not enthused about this whole situation. Mostly his mom. Everyone else, low-key cheesing. Like the general people from Idris were like, had no idea what was going on. But everyone else like that knows Alec, they're really happy for him because it's finally responding to the feelings that he's had, you know? And Magnus was not only there to crash the wedding, but he also like sorted through some of Ragnar's stuff and found the only magical things. And so he needs help sorting through that stuff to figure out which things could lead to the Book of Light. And Clary recognizes a bookmark that was in the alternate reality, and Magnus uses it to track its owner because like if you touch something, then I suppose your ownership. He uses magic. That's all that matters. And the owner is actually Camille, and she's trapped in a coffin in the basement of the hotel right now. And so the only vision he gets is like her banging against a coffin. And Clary is hesitant that Camille's going to help them, judging the whole like Simon drama and the fact that Camille doesn't really trust Shadowhunters. And then Jace says something like very ominously. He's like, well, she has to. I still don't know what this means. This never gets explained. I don't know why he says it. And Lydia, after, you know, getting left at the altar, not feeling great, but she's packing her stuff to go back to Idris. When she's pulling the cup out of like a cabinet that she locked, she gets her shit rocked, and then the cup, it gets stolen. They're planning to do the whole hotel business later. So Clary ends up giving Jace the box that they found in her mom's apartment with the initials JC on it. And she's like, this was for my mom's hypothetical son, so it might be for you. And then he reveals that his real name is Jonathan Christopher. Some damning evidence that they actually are probably related. And this is the reason that he's called Jace, because of the J and the C. And I guess you could claim that would make Jace in some worlds. And because Jace is now like convinced that they are siblings, he agrees to not shut her out. He's also having a bit of an identity crisis because he believes that Valentine raised him to be evil. And so he's like destined to be evil because he's weak. A whole bunch of like Valentine manipulation, if you will. And Alec and Magnus are chatting after the wedding and after like the whole like looking through magical artifact stuff. And his mom comes up and is being very judgy, very unsupportive. And then she leaves, and Robert Lightwood, surprising ally, he just doesn't really care at all. He asks like some clarifying questions. He asks like if they're in love, and Alec immediately denies it, but Magnus just cuts in and he's like, oh, like it's new. Because obviously he's in love with Alec, but Alec like really hasn't figured out his feelings yet. Also, when his mom was talking to him, she was being like straight up racist. She's like, all this for a downworlder? So now you're saying it like a slur. Anyway, his dad leaves telling Alec to give his mom some time because she's like adjusting to this, but more the fact that she's like, her ego's bruised because they had people from Idris come in for the wedding, and then her son turned out to be gay. And this whole time, Luke has been watching over Jocelyn's unconscious body because they have someone on watch just to make sure like nothing happens to her. And Hodge comes in and like tells Luke to go get some rest. I'll watch over her. Turns out he actually uses a ring that he has to call Valentine, and reveals that he had a deal with him the entire time that if he gets rid of his punishment rune, like the circle one that they spelled to like burn him or whatever, then he will get him the cup. And he stole the cup from Lydia. In episode 13, Morning Star, aka the season finale, we pick up not from the Hodge situation, but from Clary and Jace's incest conversation from before. Clary says the only way that Jace can get answers is from Jocelyn, and they have to get her awake for that. And so main priority is getting the Book of the White. So they ask Simon to try and get in contact with Camille. And so he talks to Raphael about setting up a meeting. And Alec tries to talk to his mom again about the whole wedding situation. And she actually says that she's not upset about the fact that he kissed a guy, because that's immediately like what he was like, oh, so you like don't like me because I'm gay? But she was like, no, that's actually fine. It was just the warlock of it all. So she's racist. Anyway, Alec was originally going to talk to her about where Lydia was because he hadn't heard from her from after the wedding, and he was like gonna go talk to her, make sure she was okay, but no one has seen her since the wedding, and so he goes to check on her. And Magnus is like walking with him when he's going to the office to go check on her, and they agree to take it slow because this is very new for Alec. And so they agree to go on a date. And when they walk into the office, they find Lydia unconscious, and she like wakes up barely just to say Hodge because that's who attacked her and stole the cup. And they check the footage because they're like, oh, like what did Hodge do? Like I don't get it, because they grew up with Hodge and like trust him, and so they're really surprised to see that he betrayed them. And they also see the different security footage of him talking to Valentine in the room with Jocelyn. And he also escaped the institute after this because Valentine did disband his punishment rune, which was keeping him trapped there. And then we see Hodge actually give the cup to Valentine on some like ship barge or something. There's a bunch of like random people on this ship that he's planning to give the cup to make more Shadowhunters. And when he's like getting the cup ready for this, he puts it into a huge tub of blood. And once it's filled, it turns the blood piss yellow. I'm not even lying. And it starts glowing. And it gives it to like the first guy in line, and he successfully becomes a Shadowhunter, albeit through some pain because it's like boiling on his way down. Judging that you're not supposed to drink blood, so that would make sense. And there's like a huge line of people that are getting ready for this. And all of Valentine's lackeys are like directing them like airport traffic control. And Jace is #1 supporter on finding Valentine. Doesn't even care about the Book of the White necessarily because he's like, I could have killed Valentine. He feels very guilty about it all. And Claire's trying to tell him to like not necessarily act rashly because it's probably going to end up getting him killed, but he's not listening to her. They don't know where Hodge is now because he just left the institute. They had no idea that he even left in the first place. So Jace calls Luke to have his pack hunt him down because werewolves are very good at hunting. Hodge ends up having to leave Valentine because what he thought originally was a deal of like protection from the Clave. He thought that he would like join Valentine's army and therefore he would protect him from being hunted by the government. But it turns out that Valentine does not fuck with him like that. He's like, no, like you have your freedom. You can go do whatever you want. I don't want you here. Valentine is also making the new Shadowhunter that he made. He's like, your first job is to go hunt down Clarissa and Jonathan, aka using his children's full name. Weird. Also, a very miraculous monarch of him.
So on you the power to rid the world of liars. All I ask in return are Ladybug and Cat Noir's miraculous.
Jace ends up fighting Hodge like on the street after he gets kicked out by Valentine, and he's very mad at him for betraying like what he thought was his family. Hodge justifies this by saying that he was paying for the Lightwoods' crimes by being a prisoner of them, basically, when they were ex-Circle members and they didn't get punished for it. And him and Jace have a very weirdly shot tussle. And Jace gets so into this fight because of like all the feelings that he has about Valentine, about being betrayed, and he ends up cutting Hodge's hand clean off. Okay, Darth Vader. And he's also fully about to kill Hodge, like stab him through the chest, when Alec and Luke end up finding him and they like stop him from doing that. And Jace still believes that Hodge deserves to die, but when Alec and Luke are like trying to heal him, he steals the ring off his finger and contacts Valentine. At the hotel, Clary, Izzy, and Simon have a meeting with Raphael to talk about maybe waking Camille, talking about the book, and Raphael says no because she's evil. And they go against this by attempting to sneak Clary and Simon into the basement where she's kept by having Izzy distract Raphael. They wake Camille up and manage to get the information that the book is in one of her apartments, but she won't say which unless they let her out. And they manage to escape the hotel with the help of Izzy because she like breaks a wall which cuts off the vampires, the sunlight coming in through the hole in the wall. And they escape through like the tunnels underneath or something. And Camille says that she'll only tell them where the book is if Simon signs a document that says he asked to be turned into a vampire, so there's not any grounds that she broke the accords. And they go to Magnus to draft this because it has to be like notarized, I suppose. But he's not very happy about this, judging ex-situationship with Camille, and also she's being generally like mean to him because of it. And Izzy ends up calling for backup while they're waiting for it to be like fully signed and ready. Back with Alec and Jace, Alec is talking to Luke just about the general situation, about how like Jace is kind of crashing out, and Jace ends up escaping with Hodge to go do a solo mission. And this is because Valentine got into his head about being trained to be a killer. As I said, like the general manipulation that he was saying, like, oh, like you are only good at killing people and you shouldn't have feelings, that type of stuff. And so once he realizes that Jace escaped, Alec calls him and he's like, dude, where are you? And Jace says, don't worry about me, like I'm gonna go find Valentine and you go help Clary. And it turns out the backup that Izzy called is indeed Alec, so he just like goes to Magnus's place to figure out what they're doing. And he walks into Magnus's apartment right when Camille is like teasing Magnus about being in love, because she like says like, oh, immortals don't fall in love. And then Magnus kind of has a reaction to it. And so she's like, oh, you are in love. And then she smells angel blood. And when she smells angel blood, she flips him around and kisses him. And this is right when Alec walks into the room. And so he's very confused. Also, like, why are we trying to cause problems with the ship that just got together last episode? They're fighting me, I think. And they end up going to her apartment with the now drafted document because Simon agrees to sign it once they're there. And it turns out she has a lot of books in this apartment. She has like 4 different libraries or something. Once Simon signs, she reveals that she actually doesn't know where the book is. It's just somewhere in this apartment because she didn't hide it. Dot did. Clary ends up getting a call from Jace while they're in the apartment because he basically tortured the information out of Hodge where Valentine was going base out of, and he took him to the boat where he was, but Valentine is now gone. At this point, Jace recontacted Valentine with the ring and said, oh, like, you're not where you're supposed to be, where are you? And then Valentine told him that he was going to target his friends, and so Jace is now warning Clary to get out of wherever they are because Valentine is going to come after them. And she, of course, doesn't listen to this because she's like, if the book is here, I'm going to find it. And then she recognizes a random cookbook that her mom used like often, and turns out the same bookmark that they used to track it here is inside of the book as well. And then once she reconnects the bookmark, it turns into the Book of White. And right after this, Valentine and his goons show up to basically hold them hostage. And then Jace shows up at the same time and is like going to fight Valentine. But Valentine says that if he fights him, then all of his friends are going to die. And Clary tries to negotiate by saying like, oh, you can have the book because I know that that's our only way of stopping you because Jocelyn is our only way of stopping you. And he basically says like, oh, I don't give a fuck about that book. Like I was planning on you waking up your mom the entire time, because all he really wants, he's like, oh, I just want my family back together. AKA I want my family to take over the world with me. And Jace agrees to go with Valentine in exchange for everyone's safety. And it's mostly for everyone, but it's also from his weird connection and the fact that he thinks Valentine turned him evil and all that stuff. And then he ends up going through the portal with Valentine, and they have no idea where they went because the way to go through a portal is thinking about where you're going. So they have no idea how to find Jace. And Clary is not having it. And then back at the Institute, they're prepping Jocelyn for the spell because Magnus is going to do the antidote. And then Magnus and Alec are working out the relationship thing, which they already kind of did because they were like, oh yeah, we're just going to take it, so we're going to go on a date. They're still at that. And just more the fact that Magnus was like letting Alec know that like him and Camille completely done, judging the whole like kiss debacle from earlier. And also because Camille said something about immortals not having real love because that's how she feels. And also from Magnus's experience of watching all his past relationships die, she also comments on that. And so Alec is asking questions about that. And then we'll get into this more next season. That's kind of like their relationship plot point, if you will, because we got to go do Jocelyn's spell. And the spell works. So yay for them. Jocelyn's back alive. Clary has her mom back. She's very happy. And then Valentine has a huge group of people like before, and he's planning to make all of them Shadowhunters, but now he actually has Jace by his side. And 11,000 words later, that's all of season 1. Genuinely, no lie, this took me forever. I'm like, it's insane how long I had to watch the show because I took so many breaks because they pissed me off half the time. And if you thought this season was crazy, season 2 actually gets even crazier, if you can imagine it. There's more gay moments, at least, that we were kind of like starved this season, not gonna lie. I do believe there's still only one gay ship throughout the entire show. Sorry to disappoint you that way, but Cassandra Clare didn't care to write anymore. And then there's even more incest, if you can believe it. I never filmed an outro before because I had a grand idea of making this a video for all 3 of the seasons of the show. Out of the realm of possibility, my computer would blow up and it would never come out simply because I still have to watch seasons 2 and 3 of the show, and I haven't started either by the time this video is like edited. If you enjoy this video, please comment, like, subscribe, all of that stuff, and check out my other recap videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.